Afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, welcome. I'd like to call to order the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency Advisory Planning Commission. Today's date is Wednesday, August 14th, 2024, and the time is 1:32 p.m. First on our agenda is the roll call to determine a quorum. And Tracy, can you please call roll?
Ms. Carr?
Here.
Ms. Chandler?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Drake? Mr. Drew?
Here.
Ms. Ferris?
Here.
Ms. Setzer?
Here.
Mr. McNamara?
Here.
Ms. Stala?
Here.
Chief Stephen?
Here.
Mr. Hitchcock?
Here.
Mr. Young? Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Tracy. Tracy, would you mind going over the remote meeting rules for today?
For members of the public, to observe the meeting, go to trpa.gov. Under the calendar header, click on Advisory Planning Commission Meeting, Hybrid Meeting for August 14th, 2024. There you will find a link to the public webinar hosted on Zoom. To address APC public members directly with your comments, raise your hand in Zoom by clicking Raise Hand at the bottom of your screen at the appropriate agenda item. With your hand raised, you will be unmuted by TRPA staff and have 3 minutes to address the APC. If you've used the dial-in numbers to join us by telephone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand and be unmuted. For APC members, if you wish to speak, you can also raise your hand in Zoom. You'll find the hand icon on the bottom of your screen. Remote APC members may not use the chat box to make any comments or to have sidebar conversations. Please, everyone, remember to mute your mic unless speaking to cut down on background noise. And finally, we would like to ask that all remote members turn on their cameras if they are able.
Thank you, Tracy. Moving on to item 2, approval of the agenda. Staff, are there any proposed changes to the agenda?
Excuse me, Madam Chairman, there are no changes, but we do want to point out that there's an errata that has been distributed to you. So that if you don't have that, let us know.
Okay, thank you. We will deem the agenda approved as posted, noting the errata that was distributed. Okay, moving on to public interest comments, agenda item number 3. Are there any public comments in the room?
Is it good? Okay. Dear Commission members, my name is Deepak Sharma. Our family owns multiple commercial parcels in these area plans which are being amended. My comments are regarding city officials' earlier attempt to disallow condos in certain zones which were previously allowed. These backward amendments were struck out by City Council, so they are not here, but I'm here to speak so that requesting such backward changes are not brought back in these amendments. As you all well know, commercial areas are typically for various types of allowed businesses. With land uses, it takes multiple years and even longer in Tahoe to plan, design, finance, and build a project. All this planning happens based on the current set of rules when the property is acquired and it's allowed uses. There is a lot of investment that goes in right there, and it is based on current uses. It is highly unfair and possibly even illegal for city authorities to come back at a later time, say, no, you're not allowed to do this anymore. It is no short of using eminent domain, except it is not for any public good. It is for the policy of using, one person's land to meet your own agenda. We are a community of small local businesses here. If you cannot support the business to thrive here, at least do not drag them backwards. The crisis we see here in the basin and that you're trying to address is a result of you not being able to harness the power of tourism to uplift the lives of the community members. These backward policies do not do any good to the community. We request and sincerely hope that the amendments to the area plan do not take away any of the allowed uses which are currently there already in the area plans. On top of hurting the current property owners, hurting local businesses, and of course, hurting the people who work for those businesses, it further sets the precedent that authorities can come back at any time and change the goalpost. Thank you. Deepak Shah.
Thank you for your comment. Do we have any other public comments in the room? Okay, seeing none, do we have any public interest comments online?
If any member of the public would like to address the Advisory Planning Commission at this time, please raise your hand in Zoom by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen or by dialing *9 if you have dialed in. And Madam Chair, there are no hands raised to comment.
Hey, thank you. That closes agenda item 3, public interest comments. Moving on to 4, disposition of minutes. APC members, are there any comments or questions on the minutes?
On May minute.
On the May 8th, 2024 meeting minutes? You can find them on page 5 of your packet.
I spotted one discrepancy on page 25. Under public comment, Mr. Flaherty's comments, line 5, number of visitors in June and then again in June and then in August, obviously, June should be changed to July to be accurate.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on the minutes? Okay, I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes with the change noted by our fellow commissioner. Can I have a second? I'll second. Okay, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Are there any objections or abstentions?
I abstain.
That's
It was Jason Drew.
okay, thank you. Motion passes. Okay, getting to the heart of our agenda, item 5, public hearings. Item 5A is the discussion and possible recommendation for approval of the proposed amendments to the City of South Lake Tahoe's Tourist Core Area Plan to expand housing opportunities and community equity by increasing density allowances and establishing minimum densities in town centers, clarifying use categories for employee housing, improvements to residential design standards, policies to support town center revitalization using special events, commercial floor area, policy clarifications, bicycle parking requirements, and vehicle parking requirements for commercial and residential uses. Additionally, amendments would increase consistency with recently amended TRPA regulations and state regulations regarding accessory dwelling units and density bonuses for affordable housing. Information can be found on page 27 of your packet. And thank you, Alyssa, for being here to present.
I'll introduce this item. Melissa's online and she will help me. And then we'll turn it over to the City of South Lake Tahoe staff. I want you to think about items 5A through C as an interrelated group of actions that you're going to take. And let me explain because I know it's confusing. We've been working almost at least weekly, if not daily, with the City of South Lake Tahoe to get this package as far along as we can. Some of the items that they have proposed are not yet consistent with the regional plan. So let me explain how we're trying to handle that. The 3 topics that I want to point out is commercial floor area. They had originally proposed some changes to commercial floor area. We have looked in our code and think we can accommodate what they desire without having to make that plan amendment. So they will reference our code and that's in the errata. So really that doesn't need to be an amendment that you address an inconsistency on. The other two items are density in the town center. Currently, what we've done, as you know, the area plans are new since 2012. What we've done in the past is identify areas where the height and the density, there's a table in chapter 13 that says where there are exceptions to that in our code. We've now gotten to the point where we have these proposals from the city. We have potential proposals from two of the counties, and working with our legal staff, we decided it's really better to quit adding footnotes to that table that say, here's the exceptions, and say, under that, there's a part B that would allow local governments to set those height and density standards in their area plans, working with their communities, they're closest to the people. So that means that we would take those height and density standards that they're proposing out of the area plan and try to move those forward with item C, which Alyssa will talk about. It's an info item this month because we wanted to make sure you all had plenty of time to think about it and hear from the local government members on this commission. And then next month, we'll bring it to you for action. We anticipate that, along with the area plan amendments, will all go to the Regional Planning Commission committee in 2 months from now. And then the whole package, we hope, can go either to RPC in October and the governing board after that, or maybe sooner. But the only item that will be, when this whole group of interrelated amendments to our code and the area plans get through, the only item that we will still not have a consistency on is density outside of town centers. And we will recommend that be pulled out of or not included in what goes forward. So I hope I haven't confused you. I hope I've made it clear. Graham is working with John Marshall online to make sure we get the right motion language when the time comes. And I think if I haven't confused you enough, that's great. But if I have, I think Alyssa and the city of South Lake Tahoe folks can clarify that. But anyway, we hope to get to where we all want to be. So with that introduction, I'll turn it over to Alyssa, who's going to introduce item 5A. We'll have the city. She'll introduce 5B. We'll have the city, then she'll do 5C.
Okay,
Thank
that
you.
sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and good afternoon, members of the committee. I'm Alyssa Bettinger. I'm a senior planner with TRPA. Thank you for having me virtually today. I'm joined today by city staff Anna Kashuba, who I'll pass it to just in just a minute after I give a quick introduction of this item. And I do want to note, thank you, John, for the introduction. Item A and B are both action items for you to take today. So just to clarify that, and then item C is not an action item, it's for discussion only, but we would bring forward the area plan amendments as well as item C to the governing board concurrently. And so those provisions that John was just mentioning in the area plan can take effect if the APC, RPC, and governing board decide to approve those amendments. Let's go to the next slide, please. So area plans, just to give a bit of context, were first introduced as part of the 2012 regional plan update. They bring regional plan concepts and strategies down to the local level, and they really allow the locals to sort of adapt these strategies to their own communities. The tourist core area plan was first adopted in 2013. It's one of 2 area plans within the city. It encompasses the State Line Ski Run portion of the city of South Lake Tahoe. So it's the Heavenly Village all the way down to Ski Run Boulevard, and then ends kind of on the other side of town near Bijou. Next slide, please. And the city has been working on these amendments for about 1.5 years now. The main focus of the amendments are looking at policies that support workforce housing, economic development, revitalization of town centers, and increased transportation options within the city. And an exciting, also an exciting part of these amendments is that they include the phase 2 housing amendments, which were amendments that we passed, that our board passed back in December of 2023, that allow incentives for density, height, coverage, and parking for 100% deed restricted housing. So those amendments are included in the city's area plan amendments. Also proposed, or another proposed change within the tourist core area plan amendments are expanding the boundary to include 2 parcels that are currently developed. And Anna can go into the details on really all of this in her slides. The city came to do an informational update to our regional plan committee back in May of 2023. And the amendments were approved by the city council back in June of this year. If the APC does recommend that these amendments, recommend approval of these amendments, they would come back to the regional plan committee as well as governing board this fall. And with that, I will go to the next slide and I'll hand it over to Anna with the city.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. I'm Anna Kashuba. I'm a senior planner for the city of South Lake Tahoe. So the item for you consists of amendments to the tourist core area plan. I do want to note that the following item, the amendments to the Tahoe Valley area plan, are very similar. I will call out items that are unique to either plan, but for the most part, what I'll be discussing with this first presentation is applicable to both. Both plans, as Leslie mentioned, after the area plans were allowed by the regional plan in 2012, the city kind of jumped on those. These 2 plans were adopted by the city in 2013 and 2015 and have gone some time without significant amendments or changes. So we are looking to do these updates to implement city housing element policies, the TRPA phase 2 housing amendments, as well as increased consistency with state laws, and then just code cleanups and correcting references to our own city code as well as TRPA code. We began this process early in 2023. We hosted some stakeholder workshops around that time, and the amendments have been heard at 4 public hearings. As mentioned, that included the Regional Plan Committee in May of last year, and just on June 18th of this year, our city council did adopt the amendments for both plans. Next slide, please. So going into the changes, the first one is regarding density. As mentioned, increasing opportunities for housing was one of the focus areas for these amendments. We have implemented a 12 unit per acre minimum density. There are some exceptions for this, which include existing multifamily developments as well as qualifying mixed use projects. The idea behind this is just that most of the large parcels that are left undeveloped within the city are in these area plans, and we really can't afford for those to be underutilized. We've also adopted a maximum density of 65 units per acre for areas within the town centers, as well as included the no maximum density for 100% deed restricted units per TRPA's phase 2 housing amendments. Next slide, please. We have included what we call our no net loss policy to focus on preserving the existing housing that we have. Multifamily dwellings that are replaced by single family dwellings would be prohibited from receiving a vacation home rental permit. We have noticed a trend specifically in the tourist core area plan that we are hoping this policy will lessen. The impacts of that trend is that developers will come in and buy duplex or triplex properties, and they'll redevelop them to one large single family dwelling that ends up being rented as a vacation home rental. So in that case, we lose all of those dwellings that were previously used as long-term rentals. And then kind of layered with that would be that units not rebuilt on site should be rebuilt elsewhere within the plan area. So say a triplex is demolished and replaced with one single family dwelling, that single family again would not be able to be used as a short-term rental. And then those 2 units that were not rebuilt on site, we would still have somewhere else in the plan area, and they should be built to the same size and number of bedrooms as those original units. Next slide, please. we've kind of been walking the tightrope on parking. I feel that we've created a structure where there's both some flexibility to increase parking as well as decrease parking. We've included an optional but kind of automatic, should the applicant wish, 25% reduction in parking when the location is within a half mile of a transit stop. That's really 99% of each area plan. So that is really overarching and would capture most of these parcels. And then further reductions would be allowed for parking if the applicant shows that the use doesn't require the full extent that code would require them to install, or if they were building some kind of alternate transportation, for example, if they were improving the sidewalks beyond just their street frontage. And then for specific uses that may require additional parking, we've also included findings that can be made to allow for parking beyond what is required by code. For multifamily projects, we are allowing just one parking space per unit. Previously, the number of parking required was based on the size of the unit. So it's one parking spot per one bedroom or studio unit, and two if there were 2 bedrooms or more. We've reduced that just to the one parking unit, as well as allowing a 20% reduction when the property owner is responsible for parking management. The most common example of this would be having the parking spot unbundled with the rent. If a tenant wants that parking spot, there'll be a separate fee associated with that. And then, as mentioned, the parking standards associated with the TRPA Phase 2 housing amendments would apply here as well. And then lastly, regarding bicycle parking, we've changed the structure. It was previously based on the number of automobile parking spaces. It's now based on the use and intensity of that use, which has overall increased the number of bicycle parking spaces that will be required. Next slide. We were looking for some more flexibility regarding commercial floor area, specifically for outdoor dining. The intention here is to increase street activation and economic growth of our existing eating and drinking uses. This is modeled after an existing TRPA policy that allows additional commercial floor area without the CFA allocation for certain parcels. So we have, again, modeled it after that. This is, as John Hester mentioned, the errata is the updated language for this section. The primary differences between the TRPA code I referenced and what we're proposing here is that it would be limited to 20 seats or 300 square feet, whichever is less, and it would be per use rather than per parcel. Next slide, please. We've shifted the residential open space requirement. This was driven by the increase in density as well as planning commission comments we received. Previously, a developer could choose either private open space or public open space. We have adjusted it to now have the requirement be that the open space is public and accessible to all units on the parcel. It should be compliant with ADA requirements. There's also a provision to limit the open space to 10% of the maximum allowable coverage. I don't see this being used very often. Again, this was the current structure is 100 square feet of open space per unit. If a project were to get into those 50, 60 units per acre, this could result in 5,000, 6,000 square feet of their coverage being dedicated to the open space. Again, we in no way want to limit the open space for these residential developments, but if somebody does wish to, give us that number of units, we do want to allow the flexibility to maybe limit the open space again to the 10% in order to get those additional dwelling units. I don't see that this would be used very often, especially I don't know that it would ever be used for any project that would be 25 units per acre or less, as that was the previous maximum. And it was always reasonable for those type of projects to accommodate the maximum requirement of the residential open space. Next slide, please. The city has adopted language that would allow for accessory uses to advertise. This would not change the overall area of signage for that use, but just would allow for them to put kind of the proper name of, say, an accessory restaurant on that signage. So if that use is allocated 40 square feet of signage, they still have that 40 square feet. They can just decide how to split it up between the primary use and the accessory use. Next slide, please. So all those items I just mentioned, again, are applicable to both Tahoe Valley and the Tourist Core Area Plan. This expansion right here is unique to the Tourist Core Area Plan. It's the addition of 2 parcels to the Tourist Center Neighborhood Mixed Use District. They're both currently hotel motel uses that are legal but non-conforming in the Pioneer Ski Run Plan Area Statement, which they're located in. Bringing them into the plan would make those uses conforming and would allow them the coverage and density benefits of being in a town center. That concludes my presentation. I'm going to pass it back to Alyssa, who would like to discuss further how these changes would interact with TRPA code.
Thanks, Anna. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, and John clarified a bit before this item, but staff have reviewed the amendments for conformance with the regional plan. And there are a few areas that I just want to point out. So the first is the proposed residential density increase up to 65 units per acre inside of a town center. Our current chapter 13 of the TRPA code allows up to 25 units per acre in town centers right now. And so under our current code, we could not find the proposed provision in the area plan conforming with our code. That said, the focus of agenda item 5C today is on a possible amendment to chapter 13 of our code, which would allow local jurisdictions to propose alternative height and density standards within centers of their area plan, as long as they do, or as long as they meet certain requirements that we feel the city has met. And so again, we are planning to take those, depending on the feedback that we get from APC today, we would take those draft amendments through the hearing process this fall, concurrent with the area plan amendment. And so if there is support for that amendment, they could be approved concurrently. The second policy is related to outdoor dining and CFA requirements. Anna touched on this a little bit, but there have the city is proposing a small amount of outdoor dining to be exempt from CFA requirements, and this is consistent with a code with the TRPA code. And our errata has been provided that lists those requirements that are consistent with the TRPA code. I'm happy to answer any questions on this, if any clarifying questions if needed. Next slide, please. So with that, I will turn it back over for any questions or comments.
Hey, thank you, Anna. Thank you, Alyssa. Do we have any questions from fellow APC? Go ahead, Eric.
Hi, Eric Young, Washoe County. We're in Washoe County also looking into the use of alternative parking standards based on a parking needs analysis. We thought it'd be easy to find a methodology or an approach that seemed like what everybody did. It turns out that it's remarkably varied how people approach those methodologies for parking analysis. So I don't need you to really go over what you're doing, but I'd like to let you know I'm interested in it and that we may be reaching out to you to understand more about how you utilize those alternative studies, what kind of methodology you accept, and how you've structured that process, because we're very interested in it, but we see that there's just an unending way of doing it. And so we're looking at a lot of different ways. And so we'll probably be reaching out to ask you more about that particular aspect of this. Thank you. That's all I have.
Any other comments or questions? Go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a question about new projects as they were if a new project is coming in, would it be able to utilize that additional 20 seats not using CFA? Or is because the way I'm reading it right now is it seems like it's for existing commercial floor area?
That's correct, yes. If there was a brand new development that was eating and drinking and they were proposing outdoor dining, they would be required to purchase the full CFA for that area. The intention behind this is really for those existing uses, as you mentioned, and to just kind of give them the flexibility to increase their capacity a little bit in the summer months when they're able to. And then another note on that is because it would be primarily seasonal, again, just to kind of give them that flexibility without purchasing the CFA, transferring it in, which can really lengthen that process when it really is a rather short season where it can be utilized.
Okay. I think I guess my hesitation here is that new projects may try to purchase less CFA than they actually would want for their outdoor seating. And then they would try to go through this process. So it becomes kind of a two-step process. And I would suggest more flexibility and just allow 20 additional seats outside seasonally without additional CFA.
I would love to hear the other thoughts on that note. As mentioned, we did kind of go toy with the wording for this a little bit. At one point that was discussed, but in trying to keep it in compliance with the regional plan and not to step any CFA allocation, we did want to make sure that it was accounted for kind of within the existing provisions.
I'm in here too.
I'll second Emily's comment there. I do think that it's important to have more flexibility for new businesses who flex into the outside during the season where they can and generate that critical income. Sometimes making a project work when you're also having to buy commodities and you're talking about a restaurant or a bar, it doesn't pencil. And there's a lot of vacant buildings in South Lake Tahoe that could be utilized. So I think it's a really good idea to not make them try to game the system or knowingly not buy the CFA, and then they're going to do it anyway. Let's acknowledge the way business really works here and just build it into the policy. I think that's a really good piece of feedback. I appreciate the direction it's going. I think maybe taking it a step further is a smart move. I don't see a lot of downside. My other question is on the parking that Eric kind of teed up. I like seeing the direction, allowing more flexibility on parking requirements. I mean, it's been over 2 years now since the state of California passed AB 2907, I think it is, that allows or requires no minimum parking requirements within a half mile of transit, but their definition of transit doesn't meet our standards in Tahoe. I was curious how you're defining within a half mile of transit for this change.
So the main, the bill, the California law that you referenced is what kind of inspired that. And as mentioned there, I believe 15-minute headways is what is required in that law for it to be considered a major transit stop for that to apply. We don't have any type of threshold for headway times. So that'll just be half-mile radius from existing bus stops or new ones if those are proposed.
Okay. By our Tahoe standards of our transportation system, no minimum headways or anything.
Correct.
Gotcha. What are some examples of how a business would be able to further reduce their parking requirements? I think you hinted at or said building sidewalks, alternative modes of transportation. Like, what are some practical ways that a business could get their parking requirements down to make a project work?
So the first would be through the parking analysis demand. That is one that is still included. However, we that was already kind of in our city code. We are kind of trying to move away from that a little bit, or at least create just other options. A lot of times that is a really big burden on the applicant. It's a long process and it's an expensive process. So that is still one option. As mentioned, generally we require them to improve the street frontage for the length of their parcel, but going beyond that, so that if the next parcel is vacant, it's not just a dead end. They could connect that sidewalk down another parcel or to the nearest connection. It could be adding additional bike parking or EV bike chargers or EV vehicle chargers. There could be, I've seen, I know down in Sacramento, some multifamily developments will provide shareable vehicles so that the residents, if they don't have a vehicle, they can still kind of they can still live in a unit where they might not have a space but still have access to a vehicle. I think that would be a wonderful option I'd love to see up here. I think that's all I have at the moment, but it was intentionally left open-ended and hopefully get some creative applicants who can also come up with solutions.
So does staff have discretion then to apply whatever reductions seem appropriate, or is it?
It'll be at the level of review. So if it's, say, a minor design review, those are approved at staff level, it would be staff. If it's a major design review or a special use, that would be our planning commission who makes that determination.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm just going to keep encouraging us to think beyond the way we've always done things and provide more flexibility for interested developers. Shared parking agreements, and really looking at the total amount of parking relative to the amount of CFA in a given neighborhood to help inform those decisions. So it's not so much on a project by project basis, because that's a key part of what slows down or stops a lot of good businesses from opening. I appreciate sidewalks, but I also see up in our neck of the woods in Placer County, a lot of requirements to build sidewalks that go nowhere. And those are also, that's a lot of dollars. Something to consider. I like the direction. I think it's not going far enough, but I like the direction we're moving. Thanks.
Thank you. John and then Susan.
Oh, yes, Commissioner Bragg, I can expand on that a bit. Besides just looking at upgrading pedestrian infrastructures, bicycle and transit, we're also encouraging creating shared parking agreements between different parcels is also an option, or developing a parking management plan. So the way we structure this is try to be as flexible as we can in order to assist the developer in getting to their goal. At least on the city council level, there is a desire to reduce parking requirements and not increase them.
Susan.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to how you were able to come up with the numbers of 12 units per acre and 65 units per acre on the minimum and maximum density.
The minimum density of 12 units per acre, our general plan actually identifies 8 units per acre as a minimum density that we should look into implementing. So that was kind of the number we started off with, brought that to our stakeholders, planning commission, city council. And everyone was in agreement that a minimum density was a good idea, should it be implemented, and we received feedback to go beyond that. So that was increased to the 12 units. The maximum density of 65 units per acre was really centered around making affordable housing projects pencil. Once they get into that range is where they can actually become more competitive for state funding.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to make a clarification too. This is Graham St. Michelle. I'm an attorney with TRPA. Just for staff to clarify as well, because we've talked about the phase 2 housing amendments and bringing this in conformance with those, but the city's adjustments here for height and density are targeting market rate projects as well as just where's the phase 2. So just a point of clarification to add.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer Carr, for the record. I have 2 questions. One is about the discussion in regard to outdoor dining and also related to the creative options for addressing parking. We've talked about, this idea of like 300 square feet or more to accommodate 20 outdoor dining seats, be exempt from CFA. But my question maybe for staff is if we're looking at it just a commercial floor area perspective, and that program, are we also still looking at it from the coverage perspective? Because if an establishment's adding outdoor dining space, we don't necessarily want it on the dirt and the grass for the customers, enjoyment and erosion, but we also don't. How do we marry that with coverage for that new patio to address the water quality issues that are inherent in the coverage discussion? Similar with the looking for innovative ways to handle parking by just using the sidewalk example again. If you build a sidewalk, you may be taking dirt out of the equation, but you're also adding coverage to the equation. So how are these things working together? And is there one program still dovetailing with the other?
I can answer that. So our proposals here doesn't affect the land coverage standards. If individual wants to do outdoor dining, the guidance that was provided to us from Brandon McMahon and Mr. Conger a few years ago is that would be considered coverage, and they're still subject to the coverage provisions of the city code. In terms of encouraging building sidewalks, coverage would also be required in those instances. So it doesn't override coverage standards as currently adopted by TRPA.
Thank you. That's very helpful. The other question I had was in regard to the density. I'm just trying to wrap my head around, going from 25 units to 65 units. I know you can't necessarily speak to any particular projects, but does that just mean in general, in concept, maybe things that you've heard, does that just make the units smaller? Or is it coupled with the height requirement to make more floors? How do you get from 25 as a standard to 65, just as a development concept on the same piece of land?
So the city, we have been in discussions with a affordable housing developer on a piece of parcel that's owned by the land. And through that process, working with them, it was determined at least the design that they want in order to make a project feasible, they needed at least, I believe, at least 4 stories and at least 65 units an acre in order to make it pencil. And also by having a higher density standard, it basically drives the size of the units. And so the whole concept of affordability by design is at play here. But yeah, we do actually have a potential project that is driving these standards.
Thank you.
I have a question, but do we have any others from ABC members?
Just wanted to clarify on the item related to Jason Drew for the record. Where there is the prohibition of, single family, then you have to do the units in another place. Is it clarified? Do those offsite units, if they're not built on the parcel, are those to be built and occupied before you could take occupation of the single family dwelling?
That's not currently explicit in the code, how we kind of treat those. I'll use a single family dwelling in an ADU, for example, is that we wouldn't permit an ADU without at least an existing or proposed single family dwelling on the parcel, and the ADU can't receive its certificate of occupancy before the single family dwelling does. So I think that would be the same approach here.
Okay. Yeah, it would be good to clarify that. I'm just thinking on, if you're a property owner and you have, there's a bunch of them in there, you have 2 small, poorly constructed units on a parcel and you want to build a single family home. I think we want to make it really clear what's required of them before they take on their projects, because we don't want to inhibit people investing in their properties. The other thing is that I think it's interesting is, because VHRs are now banned everywhere else in the city, that's exactly why that's happening in that area. And so, you know, the unintended consequences of previous decisions are coming to light and forcing, you know, new policy to be made, which is having impacts on, you know, residential properties within that area. So I think this probably won't be the last time that particular issue comes up.
Thank you. Jennifer Carr again for the record. So I'm probably going to go where no one wants me to. I apologize. We've experienced a lot of comment and discussion about safety related to evacuations and things like that. Recognizing that there's a whole nother process ongoing on a parallel track with, you know, the first responders and the fire officials throughout the basin, talking about a lot about evacuation, things we hear about all the time. But on a very basic level, and I don't expect this answer here today, but it's something that I think we should be mindful of continuing to go forward and keeping it part of the conversation is, if we're increasing the density and providing alternative parking opportunities, so there's less parking and more public transit, that's excellent for getting people to not necessarily take their vehicle with them everywhere they go. So more, you know, bike to work, walk to work, those sorts of things, and where you don't need a car. I think that's great in most places. But in the event of an emergency, how do we, the collective we, the royal we, how do we get them out if they don't own a car?
I'll actually try to answer that, even though you didn't expect.
Thank you.
We have several, we had a presentation to the board by the Tahoe Fire and Fuels team and the multi-MAC, what is it called? Multi-agency coordinating, like, sorry, I don't know all the acronyms, but clearly the first responders are responsible. The sheriffs and the police departments are responsible for evacuation. What they've told us they would like us to do in the Protect grant that Secretary Buttigieg mentioned this morning that we received is for making infrastructure resilient during climate change, including fires. And one of the items they've asked us to focus on is thinning the forest around evacuation routes. So that's one thing we'll do on the infrastructure. The other thing that the Protect grant talks about is that we put in for that we got was to set up an emergency transportation communications system. What that means in plain English is there are people who don't have cars, and how do we and set up a way to contact them and get fleets like school bus fleets, the tourist, the ski resorts and so forth that have fleets, as well as TTD and TART to those people. And if you think about it, if you can get more people on one vehicle instead of a bunch of vehicles, that actually helps with evacuation. So we're working on both of those. And so that's kind of, I think that answers your question. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the clarification. I don't see any other questions, comments, so I'll take this opportunity to review mine. I have 3. And then after this, I'm looking forward to the conversation in terms of procedurally, maybe how we move forward. Oh, and we have public comment as well after this. Thank you for the reminder. All right, so to my 3 questions, considering the proposed increase in housing density from 25 to 65 units, I wanted to understand if that does not impact the regional plan's cap on build out. Is it because you're basically shifting density into the tourist center, pulling it away from other areas, not allowing those other areas to develop and build out, correct?
That is correct. That's how it was analyzed in the initial March checklist and also the city's initial study, that any development in the town center going from 25 to 65 buildings is still subject to the TRPA's growth management system. So those development rights, or those bonus units, units of use are gonna have to come from somewhere. We're not creating that out of thin air. All we're doing is incentivizing them to be located in an area that has the infrastructure and the transit and the density of people to make that type of development work.
Okay, that's a great clarification. Thank you. My second question is related to the build out potentially of this density, but making sure that transit, bike paths, other ways of getting around town are keeping pace with that. I didn't see anything in your proposed plan that kind of puts a time element to transit, or, you know, certain aspirations or achievements should be accomplished by X date in order to keep pace with development. But could you speak to that?
Yeah, the plan itself doesn't establish any targets and dates for implementing transportation improvements or transit improvements. There are aspirational policy statements that encourages continue to develop those facilities. And also, as projects also get developed, a lot of times, you know, as a jurisdiction, we will put some of the onus to develop some of those infrastructure as part of the project. It's, as Placer County, I think it was it Placer County or Commissioner Drake talked about, it's piecemeal approach. But we do have a complete streets coordinator that works for the city, and his job is to basically build out that infrastructure within the city.
Okay. All right, thanks. And the third question I have is related to water quality, just kind of building on Jennifer Carr's question earlier. I had noticed in the environmental review that with redevelopment, that's often an opportunity to improve water quality because you can actually address excess coverage at that time. You can install BMPs that are to modern standards. But I noticed that there was also this reliance in that analysis on the payment of excess coverage mitigation fees. And those are only as good as their ability to affect real physical mitigation, meaning that the amount of money that's collected will one for one achieve a water quality benefit somewhere else. And I'm not sure when TRPA last looked at its excess coverage mitigation fees. But I know that costs of restoration, remediation, and construction, they continue to go up. And so I would just, if we're relying on that for water quality, I would want to make sure that the excess coverage mitigation fees are covering the cost of restoration.
Well, I think I would probably defer to TRPA on the excess coverage mitigation fees and whether that actually covers the cost of restoration. I don't think that's within the city's ability or responsibility to do. But like all projects, we will require that they mitigate all their water on site. Or in the case, if it's a deed restricted, John may clarify this way, if it's a deed restricted project, they actually have the opportunity to be able to plumb into a citywide stormwater system. And the city, we have quite a bit of stormwater infrastructure throughout the city that projects can plumb into.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I need to add much to that, but definitely a big ditto on the stormwater infrastructure. And Commissioner Drew can tell you that his firm is actually working with us to work with the local city and county public works departments to come up with design standards to make complete streets that also handle stormwater infrastructure. So that is what we hope happens anywhere you've got these kind of densities that we're talking about. I know we did look at the excess coverage mitigation fee, but it's been a number of years ago, so I don't remember details about how adequate it was for what it actually cost, but I know it's pretty expensive in some of the hydrographic basins to get where there's limited coverage. That's pretty expensive. I think we worked with you guys at NDSL on
Yeah,
that.
and that's what I was going to offer as well, is that we might be able to provide TRPA with current information and data related to restoration costs. So TRPA and the excess coverage mitigation fees can be,
Mhm.
you know, keep pace.
Definitely should do that. But
Okay.
again, my preference, I think all of our preference where you have these kind of densities is let's get a stormwater system in there that does this.
Right, that's ideal. Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions? No? All right, thanks for the discussion, everybody. I'll turn it over now to public interest comments. Do we have any public comments in the room? Okay, seeing none, do we have any public comments online?
If any member of the public would like to address the APC on this agenda item, please raise your hand now in Zoom by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or by dialing *9 if you have dialed in. Madam Chair, there are no hands raised to comment.
Hey, thank you. So we have two motions before us. And I wanted to ask legal if maybe there were any clarifications or changes to what is on our screen to make this a little bit more clear for APC members.
Sure. I'll take a stab at that. I know we have a couple other attorneys, our chief counsel or general counsel, sorry, John Marshall's here online, and Marcia Birch as well, who's been assisting staff on this item. Like I said, I'll sort of take a try at this, and then if anyone wants to jump in, Alyssa, John. But just to kind of summarize, as John Hester mentioned at the beginning, the TCAP area plan as well as the TVAP, which is the next one. And then the third item we'll hear today on the Chapter 13 amendments are all kind of a package. And what we've kind of covered today is that the TCAP, which is this item, and then the TVAP, there are some inconsistencies with the TRPA code. So that kind of puts us in a position of, these items, they do need to be go through APC, which means that APC does need to recommend approval of these area plans at some point before they go to the governing board. And with these inconsistencies in the area plans, the governing board cannot adopt them as they are now without taking further action to basically amend the regional plan, the code of ordinances to deal with these inconsistencies. And that's what item C is on your agenda today, the Chapter 13 amendments. So I think probably the recommendation, the cleanest way, because we've sort of heard staff's position that APC can at this meeting send these plans, the recommendations for that the governing board adopt these plans, with the understanding that, again, the governing board would have to take further action to resolve these inconsistencies at their meeting. So I think the cleanest way would be to have the motion with the recommendation. Let's see, I kind of jotted it down here, but it would say something like recommend approval, provided the governing board takes concurrent action to adopt regional plan and code amendments, allowing the area plans to increase density and to resolve other inconsistencies as may be necessary to ensure that the area plan conforms with TRPA authorities. So it is kind of long, a little bit long there, but it's just kind of your recognition that this area plans are inconsistent as written, and that the governing board would need to take further steps to resolve those inconsistencies. So I'll stop there, and if John or anyone else here has anything else to clarify, anything I said or to add.
Thank you. John, I'm going to jump in. The other John here, John Marshall, General Counsel. And I think Graham's suggestion is a good one. Really what we're trying to do is move forward as much of the area plan amendments that we can. And so that you can, and alternatively, you could also just move forward those portions of the proposal that you find consistent with TRPA code, which would be everything but those amendments regarding height and density that will be discussed in item C. So that's another way to think about it. What you really want to do is make sure that the governing board knows that you support, if that's the will of the APC, that you support all the remaining concepts in the area plan, proposed area plan amendments, but for the ones that will be discussed in item C. And that can be done in motion 2 when you're actually moving forward on the language of the area plan. And so motion 1 can be approved as is.
John, the inconsistency of the density with the regional plan and code of ordinances, that would not affect motion number 1, the findings of no significant effect, or should we call out an exception in the first motion as well?
I think to be clear, you can call it out as well. Since there is no analysis necessarily regarding the consistency of the height and density requirements.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions or lingering concerns from APC members regarding the motions? Go ahead.
Hi, this is Eric, Washoe County. I'm not sure it's quite as complicated as it may seem. I think we do this all the time. I did have the same questions about the first motion, so thank you for those and that clarification. If we do take the first option and recommend approval of everything pending governing board approval, does that mean then nothing has to come back to us? We're done with all of this? Okay, but if we do the other one, where we say we approve everything except the things that are currently inconsistent that we're gonna see, then those things would have to come back to us at some point.
This is John Hester for the record. You hit the nail on the head. Exactly what we're trying to do is, frankly, it would just be a bureaucratic process. Like if we think those things ought to be able to be set in the area plan and we're processing an amendment, and we've talked with the city about this, we probably might add a couple weeks to a month to the process to let the regional amendments and these amendments go concurrently, but that will avoid having to come back with the 25 to 65 change later. And that's how we're trying to work it out. So it's a smoother process. You're exactly right.
Go, Eric.
I'll make a motion to recommend TRPA governing board approval of the required findings, including a finding of no significant effect for adoption of proposed tourist core area plan and Pioneer Ski Run area plan statement amendments as provided in attachment B, and also provided that the governing board is able to make the adjustments to to chapter 13 that will be required to clear up the inconsistencies that are now part of the record.
Second.
John Marshall, is that a good motion?
Sorry, trying to get the right combination of pictures and voice. That's fine.
Tracy, can we go to a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Ferris,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Chief Stephen,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. McNamara,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Ms. Stala.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you, Tracy. I'll accept a motion for the second item on our screen.
Try again, Madam Chair.
Excuse me?
I believe we missed one
Yeah, you missed me.
council member.
I also vote yes. Thank you.
or make it two.
I also vote yes. I would like to add, though, I would like to suggest the additional flexibility in the future for new businesses coming in.
Thank you for your yes votes. Thank you for your votes. All right, go ahead, Eric.
I'll make a motion to recommend TRPA Governing Board adoption of ordinance 2024 to be determined, amending ordinance 2020-02 as previously amended to amend the Tourist Core Area Plan and Pioneer Ski Run Area Plan statement to include the additions and revisions as provided in attachment B, exhibit 1 and exhibit 2, provided the governing board is able to make the necessary amendments to chapter 13 in order to clear up the inconsistencies as noted in the record today.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Tracy, can you please call a roll call?
Mr. McNamara,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes, and nice job with the motion, Eric.
Ms. Chandler,
Yes.
Ms. Setzer,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Young.
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Chief Stephen,
Yes.
Ms. Ferris,
Yes.
Ms. Stoller.
Yes.
The motion also passes.
Did we get everybody this time? Yes. Good. All right. Thank you, Tracy. And thanks to APC members. We've cleared item 5A. Hey, item 5B is the discussion and possible recommendation for approval of the proposed amendments to the City of South Lake Tahoe's Tahoe Valley Area Plan to expand housing opportunities and community equity by increasing density allowances and establishing minimum densities in town centers, clarifying use categories for employee housing, improvements to residential design standards, policies to support town center revitalization using special events, commercial floor area policy clarifications, bicycle parking requirements, and vehicle parking requirements for commercial and residential uses. Additionally, amendments would increase consistency with recently amended TRPA regulations and state regulations regarding accessory dwelling units and density bonuses for affordable housing. Information can be found on page 123 of your packet. And at this time, John, would you also like to make an introductory comment?
I'll turn it over to Alyssa to introduce
Okay, great.
Anna's
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you again for the record, Alyssa Bettinger. I'm just going to do a very quick introduction to set some context for the Tahoe Valley Area Plan before I hand it to Anna. Next slide, please. So the Tahoe Valley Area Plan is the other area plan that exists within the city of South Lake Tahoe. It was originally adopted in 2015. It encompasses the area around the Y. It's primarily commercial in nature, but does include a limited number of residential and tourist uses. Next slide, please. And the proposed amendments before you today are very similar in terms of the policy changes. Anna will highlight any major differences. The amendments also propose to expand the area plan boundary to incorporate 42 parcels into various districts within the area plan. I know Anna is also going to kind of go through where those specific areas are as well. So with that, we can go to the next slide and I will turn it over to Anna.
Thank you. Once again, I'm Anna Kashuba, Senior Planner for the City of South Lake Tahoe. As I mentioned in my previous presentation, all except for that last item from the tourist core discussion are applicable to this area plan as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip over those and get into the items that are unique to the Tahoe Valley Area Plan. As Alyssa mentioned, these are for the most part going to be expansions that we've made to the area. There are 3 areas where we've included new parcels. This first one that you see here is east of Tahoe Keys Boulevard between James and Eloise, with just one parcel up north of Eloise Avenue. About 2 years before we started this process, we received a private application to make an amendment to the Tahoe Island Plan Area Statement, Special Area 2. The request was specifically regarding permissible uses within that district. So I just want to point out that it is a special area. So even back when these plan area statements were created, there was recognition that there are some unique characteristics in these parcels that required some special designation from the rest of the plan area statement. Our city council did decide to include this application with this broader area plan process, and the parcels you see have been added to the neighborhood professional district, which is part of the town center. This will meet the amendment request. It will also bring a handful of legal non-conforming uses and densities into compliance and will open up residential incentives for these parcels. I believe 5 of those 15 parcels are residential uses. Next slide, please. The second area of expansion consists of 8 parcels added to the town center gateway district. The reasoning is pretty much identical to what I just previously discussed. There are legal non-conforming uses on these parcels that will become compliant with the area plan, zoning designation and permissible uses, as well as residential incentives that would be opened up for these parcels. Next slide, please. This last section is a completely new district. It's been added to the plan area. However, it is not part of the town center. These parcels are all rather large, all about 1 acre, give or take, and are on high land capability lands. This is the driving factor between including these parcels is specifically for residential development. Again, they're high capability, large parcels. And this is also kind of the city's first attempt to incorporate the TRPA Phase 2 amendments for areas outside of town centers. We just felt that this was an appropriate area to add to the area plan, as well as capture those TRPA amendments. Next slide, please. So in that new residential district, the minimum density would apply here, 12 units per acre, as discussed before. And we were proposing a maximum of 25 units per acre. As this stands today, this number is inconsistent with TRPA's code, which limits multifamily densities outside of town centers to just 15 units per acre. So we do recognize that we would not yet be able to implement this unless consistent changes are made. Again, the reasoning behind this is just incorporating the TRPA Phase 2 amendments. And we feel that in addition to the deed restricted housing, any housing that the city can get would greatly serve the community. While these aren't within a town center, they're all within a mile of the Y, which has major grocery stores, is the city's biggest transit stop. So they still are, relatively close to those amenities and services. Next slide, please. These are changes that are made regarding permissible uses to the existing town center healthcare district. With the relocation of Barton, we heard from a lot of property owners in this area that their tenants are moving with Barton down to the state line area, and that they've been having trouble releasing those spaces to other tenants due to the limited permissible uses. So what you see here on the screen is what's been added. There are many residential uses within this area as well. So we were sensitive to those uses and stuck with adding uses that are generally kind of your typical daytime weekday hours, as to not have any noise or traffic conflicts with those residential uses. And that concludes the changes that are unique to the Tahoe Valley Area Plan. And once again, I will pass it back to Alyssa. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And just, again, go over these clarifications like I did in the previous item. There are some inconsistencies with the regional plan and code of ordinances. So I wanted to call those out so it's very clear. The first is the same as the previous item, the residential density increase to 65 units per acre inside town centers. This is a code amendment that TRPA is considering. It will be the focus of the next agenda item. The second, and this is specific to the Tahoe Valley area plan, as Anna mentioned, the city is proposing a density increase of up to 25 units per acre outside of town centers. Our current code allows a maximum of 15 units per acre outside of town centers. So this is inconsistent. And at this time, we're not considering an amendment to allow increased density above that 15 units per acre. That is primarily due to the process that we went through with the phase 2 amendments. There was generally not a lot of support from our board as well as our working group to allow increased density for market rate residential outside of town centers, just because of the goal to really concentrate development inside town centers and really focus on deed restricted residential. And then the third is the same as the previous item. The city has proposed a few revisions to the outdoor dining policy in their area plan to be consistent with TRPA's code, and those are included on the errata sheet. So as written, those would be consistent with our code. Next slide, please. And I will pass it back to Ms. Chair.
Thank you, Alyssa, for those clarifications, and thank you, Anna, for your presentation. Do you guys have any questions or comments related to this item? Go ahead, Eric.
Hi, Eric Young, Washoe County. I was not involved in any of this discussions, of course, about in the working group for the 15 to 25. I don't know what those discussions were. I don't really know the pros and cons that were discussed around a table. But I have to say that I feel like flexibility, like South Lake Tahoe is asking for, may be worth considering. Very briefly, but very to the point and concisely, they explained why it made sense. An area right around the town center, access to everything the town center had. Any of us that have been here for a while remember how all those boundaries got drawn. I mean, we did our best job. The TRPA did their best job to get those boundaries just right, but now we're seeing little amendments here and there to bring things into the boundaries and make some changes. And so just the very concept that that is a hard line of density should be thought about a little bit. I'm not going to push back against TRPAs. Like I said, I wasn't part of any of those discussions, and I don't know the in-depth pros and cons that were discussed, but as I hear the presentation, it's hard for me to think that it would be a disaster to the overall concept of driving density to the town center to allow a little additional density around the edges of the town center. So without having been part of those discussions, I'd say that I still have a little bit of concern that that's just being a little too inflexible, perhaps. And then as I sat here and thought about the CFA question and heard the comments about flexibility and new businesses and how business really works, so to speak. My thought was a larger thought about what it means to have to purchase CFA. Because now that is a basin-wide commodity like the others, when you purchase it, you basically tie it up. You either purchase it with the intent to sell it again later at a higher price, or you purchase it to use it, and then it's used and it's tied up forever. So to require people to obtain additional CFA for a seasonal use of up to 25 tables might just as a broad policy issue not be a good idea, because it's taken that CFA off the table basin-wide for things that may be annual commercial businesses.
Looks like the screen in the meeting room froze for a minute. Can everyone hear us in the room?
Alyssa, I think I just was texting and they say they're pausing.
Okay.
Get themselves back, so just hold on.
Sounds good, thanks.
But I can't hear them either, or I think it was really just because Eric was talking so fluently about density that it broke the mold or something. Caused a freeze.
John, can you hear us now?
Yes.
Okay.
And I can hear you now too, Sue Chandler.
All right. Thank you all for your patience. I believe you can see us now as well.
Correct.
All right, Madam Chair.
Are we back online
Yes, ma'am.
and recording? Great, thank you. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Jason.
Jason Drew for the record. So I just want to clarify, if you can go back to the slide for the parcels that are on what would be the south end going towards the airport. If you can go back, I think it's about 5 or 6 slides. That slide right there. So these are the parcels. I just want to make sure I understand this issue of the 15 versus 25. Alyssa's comment on where TRPA stands on that. I guess the town center comes right to what would be kind of the northwest edge of this property, right? So were there discussions about just integrating these parcels into the town center?
They cannot meet the findings that are required to do so,
Okay.
because most of those parcels are vacant. That was kind of the excluding factor.
Okay. All right. And so, and the concern is that there could be market rate used on those parcels to increase the density. I guess I'm a little confused at what the concern is about, because there seems to be a discrepancy between what the city wants to do and what TRPA can do with these parcels. I'd like to better understand that and have that resolved before this group makes a vote on it.
Yeah, I can clarify kind of what the difference is. So right now, should this area be included, the TRPA Phase 2 amendments would apply here. So deed restricted housing could be built up to that 25 units per acre, possibly more. What the city is proposing that is different from that would be that market rate units would also be able to be built here up to 25 units per acre. Again, those reasonings, location, large parcels, I think from some perspectives as well, the achievable level is, as far as income and rent goes, is market rate, which is, I think, kind of why we see less of a distinction there and would like to increase that flexibility for this region.
I can expound on that too. The city's approach, at least to housing, is rather than focusing just on deed restricted housing, we're looking at housing of all income levels, and that's why we prefer not to have, it focuses on deed restricted units, because at the end of the day, the city is still subject to the RENA requirements, and the RENA requirements includes market rate units, just not deed restricted units. Actually, the trend right now in the city is we're actually exceeding our RENA numbers for deed restricted housing, and we're actually behind on market rate and moderate units.
Thanks for that clarification. Yeah, that's where I was trending to want the discussion to go, is we need an increase in housing total. And if there is all of the opportunity for the deed restricted within the town center, and it doesn't, these parcels are not eligible to have the finance to become in the town center, it seems like I guess I need to better understand why we wouldn't want to have the increased density on these parcels.
I'll try to answer that. When we were doing the phase 2 housing amendments, we had actually proposed basically a gradient where you could go, I don't remember the specifics, but you couldn't have exactly what you had in the town center, but you could have slightly reduced as you moved away from the town center. And that got pretty far in the process. And then it was determined that we didn't have adequate environmental analysis around the whole region to do that part. So that part, plus the fact we were getting sued, we pulled that out. And it's not, back to Eric's comments, it's not necessarily something we disagree with. We're just not in a position right now to move it forward with item C because we haven't done the environmental analysis on it. Same thing with totally understand the flexibility you want to have on coverage. If we were to say you don't need coverage for this, we'd have to do a regional level environmental analysis of it because there's a fixed set of development rights. Not that we don't want to, not that we don't think those are good things to consider. And in fact, those may get considered in the phase 3 housing, or there's other venues. We've had not just the city, but other local governments say, we'd like to have something between town centers and the rest of the region.
Right.
So it's something we probably need to look at in the near future.
So does the city including this in their element of this update help you have that conversation with the governing board?
Oh, I'm sure it will. I think we'll probably talk about it in the phase 3, which is starting this fall on housing, because we're going to be talking about development rights and we're going to be talking about.
Yeah.
So I think, and frankly, I think if something like putting a storm sewer system in where there's and allowing getting away from the coverage because you've got stormwater infrastructure, if it's good for deed restricted housing, it's good for housing.
Yeah.
So I think we're getting close to having those discussions anyway. That I don't know if that.
Yeah, that helps. I guess then my last question just is that the intent for the city? That's why you're moving forward with that change, knowing there's this discrepancy because you're responding to TRPA's request to put out what it is that the city wants, and then TRPA can then respond to that. Is that the intent?
Yes, that's part of it. The other part too is just the feedback we received from our constituents and from our city council looking for opportunities to increase density where multifamily is allowed today, not starting to rezone single family lots into multifamily areas, but to look for areas where we can build out higher density where it's allowed today. Essentially.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Karen, I see you're at the table. Were you just here for support?
Sorry, Karen Fink, yes.
Okay.
But John captured it, so I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Karen Fink always tries to keep me honest. I need all the help I can get.
That's a very good quality. All right, go ahead, Emily.
Thank you. I just want to say in general, I'm supportive of the direction of these amendments and I'm excited to see some changes happening. I do also sit on the Tahoe Living Working Group. So there was a concern as part of that process that if we allowed overall higher densities, that we would just end up seeing more second home type condos, or for example. And I think in a normal economy, you don't think about that. We don't have normal economies in Tahoe. I'm not sure we could build enough housing for the desire of second homes, to be honest. So this would be an interesting experiment to play out because on one hand, I see such a strong desire for more and more second homes, even if they're smaller condos probably. On the other hand, I know there's this theory of kind of musical chairs. So if you have people buying up single family homes right now in condos as second homes, if you actually just build more housing overall, there could be a shuffle of people taking, not maybe selling those second homes, moving into something else, and then it frees up other types of housing. So it could be an interesting experiment, but that was the background of the living working group from my perspective. Because we did want to incentivize the higher density to really get that deed restricted housing. But I'm open to this. I also had another question. The public comment we received earlier, did that apply to this item? And if so, could that be explained?
I believe the gentleman here who spoke, I
Yes.
believe it did apply to this item, but you guys would have to respond.
Yeah, I can elaborate on that. At one point, it was proposed as part of this area plan to prohibit two-step subdivisions. So a multifamily development that is converted into condominiums. It was at one point proposed that those would be prohibited from obtaining vacation home rental permits. That was brought up by Planning Commission and was brought to City Council in June for adoption. And at that point, they removed that.
Okay, thank you. That concludes my comments. Thank you.
We also like to point out too, because of Measure T, it's Emerald Bay Corridor Connection District doesn't qualify for vacation home rentals. So we're not concerned about any future development area becoming vacation home rentals. It basically become residential units that either are full ownership or for rent. But also at market rate, just not deed restricted units.
All right, thanks for that clarification. Do we have any other comments here, Kevin?
Echoing what Emily said, I also am supportive holistically of this. And then dovetailing a bit on what Eric brought up. I do think it's an interesting, a worthy conversation to have about potentially using a seasonal permit to address outdoor dining versus purchasing CFA. I'm curious if TRPA code would prohibit that currently, if we're talking about a regional code update issue to even allow that to occur as a tool for the city to manage the flexible outdoor dining in the, on a seasonal basis.
Probably Alyssa would be the best one to answer.
Yeah, we allow temporary activities. And so those are up to 6 months, but it's not it's not in perpetuity. It's on a 6-month basis, and then you can apply for a 6-month extension. So you could theoretically have 2 seasons of outdoor dining, but then that would be it. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, so you could jump through some hoops on an ongoing basis and probably make it work, but it's not something most business owners would realistically do. I can just say I own a couple of bars and restaurants, and we absolutely depend on our outdoor dining to make the annual business work. And anything we can do to support small cafes, coffee shops, bars with seasonal outdoor dining, we should, because as the shoulder seasons get more shouldery and the summers are our peaks, as much as we'd love to spread it out, the summers matter a lot, and that outdoor space is really important. I think there's a fundamental, the addition of coverage is a whole nother conversation, but there's a lot of places where businesses can flex outside and then get popped with, oh, you don't have the CFA, so you can't have seating out there. And I think we should work hard to solve that, to keep our small businesses thriving during the months that they can really make money to sustain through the slow months. So.
And if I may give a little more background, we actually suspended that requirement during COVID, so you could have dining distances, and almost got a code amendment to make that permanent. The issue was, how do you track it? If you move it back and forth during the year? We think maybe we could bring that forward again and put the tracking requirement on the local government, if the local government wanted to do that. But again, it's, we don't necessarily disagree. We just need to get there.
All right, so we have a question here regarding our upcoming motion. But before we go there, just wanted to make sure I'm not missing anybody who's online. Do we have any APC members online who want to ask a question or have a comment? I don't think so. So. Okay, right, all right. Okay, thanks for the conversation, everybody. At this time, I'd like to move us to public interest comments. Do we have any public comments in the room? Seeing none, do we have any public comments online?
If any member of the public joining us on Zoom would like to make a comment, please raise your hand now by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen or by dialing *9 if you have dialed in. Madam Chair, there are no hands raised to comment.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, I would like to entertain a motion. We have 3 before us for this item 5B. But maybe before we do that, I know Jennifer, you had a question about that, so let's get that flushed first.
Thank you. Could you go back a couple slides to the summary, right before you went to APC comment? Yes, that one. So unlike the first agenda item, where there is a table 13 fix on chapter 13. Yeah, fix under consideration that doesn't apply to the second bullet. That's not in conformance with TRPA code. So it seems that we would not be able to move forward with that residential density increase as part of a motion because there's no fix for that inconsistency with the TRPA code. Is that correct?
John Hester here, that's correct. So we recommend, you recommend approval of everything but that.
But that, okay.
And accept not a provided. Okay. Do I have an APC member who is willing to take a crack at the first motion? Yes,
Ellery?
and go ahead, John.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to make certain I didn't hear John said you still need to do the ERIC language regarding the increased density within town centers, since that's not consistent with chapter 13 as it's currently drafted.
Yes, correct. So that
Thank you.
language
That's
would
all.
be, okay, but just to clarify, John, that language would be provided that the governing board is able to make the chapter 13 code of ordinances changes.
Correct.
But for the density increases proposed outside of town centers, we would have to accept that from our motion and not allow it to move forward to governing board, if I'm understanding correctly.
Or you can do it within those 3, they split it into 3 motions. So you can take motion 2, staff's recommendation, as I understand it, would be yes on 3, except with the proviso that you would remove in option, or in motion 3, the increase in density. And it's not, again, it's not because the desire isn't there, it's just right now consistent with code.
Okay, I understand. Yes.
Thank you. Could we do it with just the first two amendments with language that says except for the proposed increase in density to 25 units outside the, or do you feel like you need the third motion?
You can, Eric, you can do it with accepting by incorporating number 3 and the number 2 if you like.
Okay. May I?
Please proceed.
I'll try. I'll make a motion to recommend TRPA Governing Board approval of the required findings, including a finding of no significant effect for adoption of proposed Tahoe Valley Area Plan amendments as provided in attachment D, provided the governing board can make the necessary amendments to chapter 13 to resolve the density inconsistencies.
Second.
With, oh, hold on a second. I didn't exclude, may I do that again?
Yes, please
I'd
start from the
rather,
beginning.
I'd rather exclude the third motion and do it in two.
That sounds good.
Okay, I'll make a motion to recommend TRPA Governing Board approval of the required findings, including a finding of no significant effect for adoption of proposed Tahoe Valley Area Plan amendments as provided in attachment D, with the exception of the proposed increase in density to 25 units per acre in the Emerald Bay Connection Corridor, and provided that the governing board can make the necessary amendments to chapter 13 to resolve the other density inconsistencies.
Can I get a clarification? Can I request that we do each motion separately because of the decision that city council made in adopting the Tahoe Valley Area Plan? I'm gonna have to vote no on motion 3.
We're not going to do motion 3.
So you're not gonna do motion 3 at all? Don't you need a motion to take that off?
So Eric, John would like to be able to vote yes on motion 2.
Okay.
And so by splitting into 3 motion allows him to vote yes on 2 with the understanding that motion 3 will remove from motion 2.
Yeah.
John, would it make
Okay.
sense for us to move motion 3 to be motion 1, and
Yeah.
then the following motions can be subject to our vote on motion 3, now 1?
I would make it, you have to make it motion 2, make motion 3, motion 2, and motion 2, motion 3 as to the remainder of the proposals. You need to make the findings first before any adoption of an area plan language.
Okay, I understand.
So his first motion.
Should be okay.
So Eric, as I understand John's objection, it included the removal of
Yes.
the density for 25. John, I think you can still vote yes on the findings, even with the removal, and preserve your ability to vote no on item 3, which would be item 2, if that's all right.
That works.
So I think you have an outstanding motion on the table that needs a second to accomplish what you need.
We have a second from John Hitchcock. Tracy, may I have a roll call?
Ms. Ferris,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Chief Stephen,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Ms. Setzer,
Yes.
Mr. McNamara,
Yes.
Ms. Chandler,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Ms. Stahler.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you, Tracy.
Did we anticipate any changes to motion 3, or is it as stated? I think it's as stated.
I believe that's correct.
Yes. I'll
Yes,
make a
that's correct.
Eric Young, Washoe County, I'll make a motion to recommend removal of the proposed increase in density to 25 units per acre in the Emerald Bay Connection Corridor EB-CC, Table 4, Development Standards in Attachment B, Exhibit 1.
May I have a second?
Second.
Tracy, may I have a roll call?
Ms. Ferris,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
No.
Chief Stephen,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Ms. Chandler,
Yes.
Ms. Setzer,
Yes.
Mr. McNamara,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
No.
and Ms. Stoller.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Tracy. Eric,
For
do you
our
mind?
final motion is, do we start by recognizing the motion we just made?
You can if you want to for clarification purposes, but it is not absolutely necessary since that has already been removed.
So that's already been removed. Okay. I'll make a motion to recommend TRPA Governing Board adoption of ordinance 2024 to be determined, amending ordinance 2021-01 as previously amended, to amend the Tahoe Valley Area Plan to include the additions and revisions as provided in Attachment B, Exhibit 1, and the maps in Exhibit 2, provided the regional governing board can make the necessary amendments to Chapter 13 to resolve the inconsistencies noted in the record.
May I have a second?
Second.
Tracy,
Mr. McNamara,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Ms. Chandler,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
yes.
Ms. Setzer,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Chief Stephen,
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Ms. Ferris,
Yes.
Ms. Stoller.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Thank you, Tracy. And thank you, Eric. That was hero's work. I appreciate everybody working together. All right, we've cleared item 5B. And as previously noted, item 5C is an informational update. Alyssa, can you please present? Oh, please, before we move forward, let me read it in full. Item 5C is the informational update on the draft amendments to Chapter 13 of the TRPA Code of Ordinances, the goals and policies of the regional plan to allow local jurisdictions to propose alternative density and height limits in centers, and discussion of policies to clarify commercial floor area plan requirements for outdoor dining. Information can be found on page 211 of your packet. And with that, I'll turn it over to Alyssa to present.
Thank you. And so the subject of today's discussion again is around sort of these larger amendments to streamline the process for town center redevelopment and activation. This again is an informational item. We're not asking for direction from the APC. We just want to hear your input today. Next slide, please. So we're going to be discussing two changes. Both of these are in response to requests from the local jurisdictions to make our code more clear and streamline some existing processes that we have right now. This is, the process of codifying some existing processes that support the regional plan goals and policies of promoting redevelopment and activation of centers. And we're bringing this to the APC. As some of you are practitioners of our code and regional plan, we really want your input before moving forward. Next slide. So the first topic that we can talk about is the amendments to Chapter 13, again, that we have mentioned quite a few times in the previous items. This would be to address density and height in town center or in centers of area plans. Currently, Chapter 13 lays out the maximums for both density and height that are listed on this table on your screen. The draft amendments that are included on page 215 of your packet would set up a more clear process for local jurisdictions to propose higher density and height in centers of their area plans. Local jurisdictions can currently do this. They can propose higher density and height standards when they're going through an area plan amendment process. As part of that request, they have to do two things. One is they do need to amend their area plan, which requires local approval as well as TRPA approval. And then the second is TRPA has to make a code amendment that essentially allows that higher height or density standard to take effect in that specific site or district. So for in the case of the city, they are asking for 65 units per acre within their existing area plans in the city and in the centers. In this second part, the TRPA code amendment, over time in doing these amendments for certain locations results in what we call spot zoning, essentially making a special allowance for a specific district or an individual site that results in having different regulations for certain areas versus the regional standards that exist elsewhere. And so we want to have we're trying to take this opportunity to set clear guidelines and a process to allow local jurisdictions to sort of take control of their of planning decisions in their jurisdictions, because we do know that they are closer to their communities. Next slide, please. As a result, the draft code language would allow local jurisdictions this greater control over planning in their jurisdictions by setting up a process with requirements when they want to propose alternative standards above the maximum set forth in Chapter 13. And these requirements are that the alternative standard would need to be consistent with the overall goals and policies of the regional plan. It would have to demonstrate that it wouldn't have an environmental impact. So it would, need to go through the appropriate environmental review as stated in Chapter 3 of our code. And this is, standard with any area plan amendment. And then it also requires APC as well as governing board approval. So it would, typically follow the same process that exists today, but it would take out that second step of having or of us requiring us to do an amendment to the TRPA code. Because we are proposing this for both density and height limits, even though the city does only needs this amendment for density, we are proposing to include height because we anticipate that we will get requests for additional height in the future. And because the height limits are listed in the regional plan, this would include a regional plan amendment to the community design goals and policies. So that is included in your packet as well. Next slide. So shifting gears, and I know we've talked a lot about outdoor dining policy today, so we'd like to get your input on this. But the second kind of area that we want to talk about is focus on outdoor dining and what we can do to better encourage encourage outdoor dining while staying within our overall growth caps, specifically, our CFA requirements. This discussion is in response to the city amendments, but this is also something that has been, difficult to communicate clear requirements about to the public, as well as our MOU partners in the past. As John mentioned in the previous item, we had some guidelines during COVID that have since expired that we would like to potentially reinstate as part of this process. Our current interpretation for outdoor dining distinguishes between outdoor dining and outdoor seating. Outdoor dining is sort of the commercial part of, eating outdoors, where there is service by wait staff. You can pay for your food. Typically, it's enclosed on more than, one or two sides. Whereas outdoor seating is, somewhere where someone can go pick up their food that they get within the restaurant, bring it outside to eat. There's not a commercial activity taking place. And again, right now, our current code interpretation does not require CFA for outdoor seating, but it does require CFA to be obtained for outdoor dining. There are some exceptions to that, which we've talked about a bit today. We have a current code section that the city that has been included in the city's errata that allows up to 500 square feet of outdoor dining to be exempt from CFA requirements. But again, that is somewhat limiting in certain situations. Next slide, please. So in the near term, there are a lot of things that we could do in the longer term, but in the near term, a couple of changes that we would like to make are clarifying existing policy on CFA. So we would do that by including two new definitions in the chapter 90 of the TRPA code, one for outdoor dining and one for outdoor seating. And that's basically just codifying our current rules for when we require CFA and when we don't. So we can be very clear to the public and our local jurisdiction partners. This would continue to exclude outdoor seating from CFA requirements, but would continue with our current policy of requiring outdoor dining to obtain CFA. We would also like to reinstate those guidelines that we did have during COVID. Those guidelines allowed restaurants to shift some of their capacity outdoors on a seasonal basis. So for example, if a restaurant has 20 seats or 20 tables indoors, they could shift 5 of those tables to an outdoor area on a seasonal basis, as long as it's sort of temporary. And John did mention, we brought that forward a few years ago, and there were some concerns about tracking mechanisms. So we would need to work with the local jurisdictions to make sure that, those don't become a permanent outdoor use. And then the other, that I just want to address Jennifer's question earlier. All of these policies are, they're not changing our coverage requirements. And so our coverage requirements that exist today would not be changing with these potential amendments. And then another just point to make is that we have not included any draft amendments in your packet regarding outdoor dining. We'd like to just get your input kind of on these concepts before we bring them forward. Next slide. In terms of next steps, we are planning to incorporate any feedback that we get from you today and then bring back proposed amendments to the code and the regional plan for both of these items to APC, RPC, and governing board this fall, and they would move concurrently with or before the city's area plan amendments in order for those amendments to fully take effect in the way that you have made the motions. So with that, I will pass it back to Ms. Chair to.
Thank you, Alyssa, for the presentation. Are there any APC comments or questions? There's a request for feedback. Go ahead, Jason.
Just to clarify, it was my understanding, I know there are projects that have had outdoor dining and it's considered an accessory use and therefore CFA was not required. So how is that? I'm not hearing that in what I saw here. I think a good example is what's now the Golden Nugget added when it was the Hard Rock, added that outdoor patio seating. It was considered accessory and didn't require CFA. So, and there's a few other examples of that. So how is that contemplated within this? Because I'm not hearing that.
Yeah. So there are a number of instances and they're all a little different. Some have transferred in CFA, others, have not transferred in CFA, but their outdoor dining has expanded somewhat over the years. And this is, a conversation a little bit about enforcement of, how can we find the balance of enforcing some of, of encouraging outdoor dining, but also putting in place policies that we can enforce. So I'm not exactly sure about the specific nugget example, because we have a lot of different examples. But yes, they can have a certain amount of CFA, up to 500 square feet is listed in our code for outdoor dining.
I'll add to that. We had some enforcement issues where people didn't have CFA they should have. I don't know that specific on the Hard Rock.
Yeah. So if it's up to 500 square feet, it could be considered accessory and not require CFA. That's the finding that's being made. Anything over 500 under this new clarification would be if it's outdoor seating. And I think it is important that we're clarifying outdoor seating from outdoor dining because they're certainly different. So for outdoor dining beyond 500 square feet, they would have to have CFA to cover anything above 500 square feet.
I think, and maybe Melissa can correct me, but I think the way the code is written today, the 500 square feet, it's one-time exemption and it can't be combined with any other commercial area allocation. So you can't say do a project, transfer in 500 square feet and then ask for 500 square feet exemption to get 1,000 square feet.
Right.
I don't think it works that way. It's a one-time exemption and it applies to the project area. So if you're in a complex that has multiple restaurants, only one business would qualify for that exemption. At least that's my understanding of how it works.
So just to make sure I'm clear, a business today could do outdoor dining up to 500 square feet without CFA?
Correct.
Listen.
Yeah, up to 500 square feet or 5% of the existing, commercial space, whichever is less.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just jump in and just add a little bit to Jason's question. Jason, the key thing is in your example, the initial use of the restaurant internal to a casino, for example, is accessory. So outside dining, it's accessory by definition if it's coming off an accessory use. And that, of course, depends on whether or not there's separate advertising and a separate entrance and all the things that would make the internal dining accessory. If it required CFA, then you would be in this world of if you move outside, you can get 500 square feet, or if you want more, then you need to have CFA. So it's that casino example was really because the original use was accessory. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, John, that's helpful.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you. I have a question on this topic and then there'll probably be more topics. But on this one, I picked up on the word shift up to 20 chairs, basically outdoors. Is that a very literal use of that word. I mean, you can't add 20 seats outdoors for the summertime to increase your ability to serve the tourism population for the summer. You actually have to shift seats from indoors to outdoors. You don't, there's no additional capacity in that ability to have outdoor dining. The net number of chairs remains the same. And if so, is that related to parking or something else? Or are we trying to maybe be more responsive to business by providing more outdoor dining during the high season?
Yeah, I had the same question. I think in theory, it made, to me at least, it made sense, but if you're in a situation where your indoor dining, infrastructure is essentially bolted into the ground, how do you transfer that to the outside? And that was the concern I had with that strategy.
Yeah, the guideline that we issued during COVID, it was a shift. So the overall capacity could not change. So it was, I don't know what we did in the case of tables being like bolted to the ground. But it was a shift. It wasn't an addition.
Emily, thank you. I am okay with this because it provides some additional flexibility to business owners. That said, given our conversation today, I don't think it provides enough. And this is a temporary use. Like Eric said, it does take up CFA for something that is really a 6-month use. So that doesn't really seem like the best idea in the long run. And I would prefer down the line to see an allowance of a certain amount of tables for outdoor dining in addition to the existing indoor with no additional CFA, because we do want to activate our street presence, increase sense of place, encourage businesses, and it's really hard for businesses up here to survive. So I would like to see that in the future. I have comments on height and density, but I'll wait. Maybe we'll round this out first.
Okay, thank you. Go, Kevin.
I'll echo what Emily just said. Yeah, it makes sense to me that there should be some provision that maybe there's a fixed amount. Maybe it's no more than 50% of your seating indoors can be outdoors, but the ability to increase your total seats during the period of the season that we need it is the practical need of businesses, period. And a lot of businesses just reconfiguring the inside of the restaurant to serve the outside in the summertime isn't very practical. My follow-up, I guess, question after that comment would be if a business is having to purchase CFA to achieve the kind of outdoor dining they're looking for, does that also trigger additional parking requirements currently?
Go ahead, John.
It would at the city.
Oh, sorry, Alyssa, do you have a follow-up to John's answer?
Yeah, it can, depending on a few different factors, but it would change the overall capacity within the restaurant. And so it could trigger additional,
I have a question for the APC members, and that is, we have traditionally only dealt with this issue in the context of restaurants, but we know that outdoor sidewalks, businesses have moved some of their stuff outside during summer seasons. Is it reasonable for us to distinguish between restaurants and other businesses that might want to expand their CFA footprint by moving some element of their business outside? Or are restaurants unique in that aspect?
Oh, John, this is Jennifer Carr for the record. Are you referring to things like racks of clothing from a retail store?
Yeah. Books, You know, is that kind of stuff, is that distinct? Can we make a distinction between restaurants and that kind of activity? On what basis do we make that distinction? And I know Kevin has a lot of experience with at least the restaurant side.
This is John Hester, maybe farmers markets or things like that as well. And what you're kind of prompting here is it a fraction of a development right if it's seasonal or something like that? Since we're trying to get input, I just
The first thing that comes to, this is Kevin Drake. The first thing that comes to mind, John, is if you're a bookstore, if you're a, outdoor gear store, you're not going to leave that out there all summer. It's going to go out in the morning. It's going to come back in at night. It's going to be a very, very temporary use, like on a matter of hours, not months. Outdoor seating, dining, that's more of an investment. And so that's the biggest distinction I see. I don't know how well current city and county code addresses, things like storefronts and what kind of outdoor displays you can have, signage, things like that. I know there's times it can get carried away too. So I know it's a bit of a slippery slope, but look around and see how many restaurants and bars are closing versus opening right now. It's a time to think a little bit more, I guess, progressively about this.
Eric and then John.
Thank you, Eric Young. Sometimes it's a good idea to go back and just remind ourselves what the purpose of CFA or any of these development rights are. I mean, why did somebody decide that CFA was something that should be regulated and controlled? And let's make sure we really are answering that question, and then that will help us answer these questions. I mean, should somebody wheeling their books out or close out? Was that really the original purpose of CFA, to put, in the summertime, put your shirts out on the sidewalk? I don't think so. I'm not quite sure it was the purpose of regulating seasonal seats out on the sidewalk either. So I don't have a perfect answer, but I think in these moments, it is extremely useful to go back and remind ourselves of what the purpose of the regulation is in developing an answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. John?
This is John Hitchcock. I can tell you the city, how we came up with our square footage of 300 square feet. It's actually tied to STPUD regulations. They allow basically restaurants to expand up to 20 seats without having to get a new restaurant. So the minute you expand 20 seats, and we calculate that to come out to about 300 square feet. And that's how we got to that, because if you go over the 20 seats, then the business automatically has a new restaurant.
I can say from experience in Truckee, California, the sewer districts assess a fee per seat, and it's one price, $550 one time. It's like a hookup fee. We have another name for it. For indoor seating, and then it's half that for outdoor seating. So there's a mechanism at least in place to ensure that the utility is covering the additional use. I won't get into code around number of urinals and stalls and things like that. It's outside of the scope of this discussion.
We all appreciate that. Thank you, Kevin. Go ahead, John Hester.
Well, I was just gonna, I know I'm not an APC member, John Hester here, but we will, I think, be looking at fractional development rights or development rights scaled to the size of housing in phase 3. At least that's one of the things we've been hearing people want to talk about. And I'm kind of wondering if maybe you can scale development rights based on seasonal use or something like that. I mean, that's kind of what I hear. The hookup fees are kind of related to, I don't know, just since we're trying to get ideas into the process here.
And to get at Eric's comment about zooming out and asking what's the intention? Well, why did CFA get invented as a commodity to manage development and growth in the basin? I think it's fundamentally tied to assumptions about travel demand, trips, parking. which are generally tied to national ITE numbers that may not be reality here. So there is it's worth considering. That's too much of a discussion to get into deeply today, but it's worth considering what Eric said about the fundamental assumptions of what CFA is based on and kind of what it was and how it applies today.
Go ahead, Emily.
I agree with that. I think I still like the idea of having a certain amount that would be accepted for outdoor dining. And then maybe over that, if a business wanted more, then that could be fractional development, right? I mean, I think when I think of CFA, my initial thought is buildings. You know, we're trying to prevent a certain amount of buildings as growth, development growth, built environment. There's also the traffic and trip generation. But I know that gets very complicated, but I will say most people aren't coming here for a restaurant. They're coming here to be at Lake Tahoe. So I think having a certain exception amount, like was proposed by the city, makes a lot of sense.
I would like to move the conversation along, but before I do, I just want to check with members online. I don't see any hands raised. Alyssa, do you have a second part of your presentation?
I don't, but I would, appreciate any comments that, if there's any concerns about the first portion of the presentation around the height and density amendments to chapter 13, as well as the regional plan, it'd be helpful to hear those now.
Do APC members have any comments? Go ahead. Who does? Kevin?
Emily, I think you said.
Oh, Emily and then Jennifer.
I feel like I'm very vocal today. Thank you. I have a question about, would this be an unlimited? I mean, I know that the local jurisdiction and the governing board still have to approve it. So obviously there's probably some sort of limit within reason. But under the code, this would be an unlimited height increase, not say a 25% increase, for example.
Correct. Yeah, as written, there wouldn't be a cap on it.
Okay, thank you. I know we have certain developments that would request additional height, and I appreciate that this prevents the spot zoning, and that our hearing bodies would have to consider that additional height request at an entire, town center or basis. So I do appreciate that. I know we have a lot of community members who are extremely concerned, at least in North Lake, about additional height and the character that that brings. Thank you.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you. On this item in the red line to the code of ordinances, particularly on page 223 of our packet, an addition of a number 5 for alternative height and density standards within centers and area plans. I see how this streamlines future work with area plans so that they don't have to do both the area plan process and the TRPA governing board code amendment process. So I'm supportive of efficiency in government. And I'm sure I know the answer to this question, but this doesn't create prospective adoption without a public process, right? The height and density would still be a very public process through the area plan amendment, much like we already did today, correct?
Correct. And also, there are other building height provisions in the code, not in this table, but further down, there's, I don't know, Alyssa mentioned those. And I also wanted to ask Alyssa if she could let you know a date by which she would want additional input, because some of you may, I know you think about APC all the time, but seriously, some of you may have some thoughts when you go back to your jurisdictions or whatever, that she would appreciate getting in a week or two, but I don't know what the deadline she needs to prepare the packet to come back to you next month. But if she could share that with you, I think that would give you another opportunity for input.
This is Graham St. Michelle as well. Yeah, and just to reiterate, it would still be at the local level and then coming back through APC and through the governing board to make the approval. We still need to sort of work on this language in here, and that'll come back to you in final form for a recommendation of approval in the future. So this is just a kind of bare concept at this point.
Thank you. And that actually gets to my second question and or comment for future drafting. In part B, it talks about the lead agency preparing the required environmental documentation as set forth in the code, blah, 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 that demonstrates the alternative standards will not have a significant environmental impact. And I'm wondering if all of the thresholds are considered environmental impacts, even scenic or noise, whatever, or if that word environmental should be removed, that it wouldn't have an impact on a significant impact on any threshold. If there are thresholds that fall outside of quote unquote environmental. So
Good point. And I know scenic is one of those thresholds that it's in the compact. Is it environmental? It depends on it, but you can't degrade the scenic threshold by changing your height standard. So there are some other, guardrails, if you will.
Jennifer, there's also other impacts, potential environmental impacts other than thresholds. While we have a lot of thresholds, they don't necessarily cover every single type of environmental impact associated with development. So we are obligated under Section 7 of the compact to look at environmental impacts, which include impacts to thresholds and potentially impacts to other areas of environmental concern that aren't covered by thresholds.
I think that's a helpful conversation. I'll just add one additional comment. Putting on my Nevada Tahoe Regional Planning Agency hat, which regulates structures, housing, gaming in the basin. There, was a sense in the late 70s, early 80s of casinos proliferating and these big box structures popping up all along the shoreline. And we need to do something about that because they create an impact to the scenic quality of our environment, plus other impacts to our environment. So those structures were fixed in time and they can't exceed their current cubic volume. Their current envelope is what they've got. You can't go bigger or taller than that. So I would just want maybe TRPA staff to keep that in mind as they're considering unlimited height in certain areas. That, to Jennifer's point earlier, that scenic standards are very important, and that'll should be kept in mind as these amendments go forward. Go ahead,
For the
Karen.
record, could I add something? Thank you.
Yes.
I think that's a really excellent comment that we'll take into consideration. And I did just want to piggyback on what Graham was mentioning about the need for environmental analysis. Any, area plans will need to do an environmental analysis of the height. So we don't really anticipate that an area plan would be able to just allow, like 100 feet throughout their entire town center, because then they would need to show that a building anywhere within that could be 100 feet and not have a scenic impact. And so, that's kind of the point of having some set height throughout. That means that we've already done the analysis and understand that, hey, if a building comes forward that's under that height, we know it's not going to have a scenic impact. It still has to make scenic findings, but the height itself will not automatically exceed a ridge line or a view line because we've already analyzed that height. So it's unlikely that an area plan could just set a really high height and be able to pass the environmental analysis.
Great, thank you. Appreciate the clarification. Okay, I think we had a very robust conversation on item 5D. Are we on 5C still? My apologies. I'd like to move us on to the next item if there are no objections.
The only thing here is that Eric left and we were at our quorum, so now we're below. So maybe we take a pause and hopefully we're trying to track him down, but the next item is an action, and so we'll need to get the quorum back if we're gonna continue taking an
Okay.
action.
Thank you. This may be a good opportunity for a bio break. All right, welcome back, everybody. Appreciate your patience. We lost a member, but we gained a new member in Brian Judge, who's sitting in for Lahontan. So thank you very much, Brian. Now we have a quorum and we can continue.
Madam Chairman, just so it doesn't look like we were making up a way to get a new member,
Swapperoo.
we actually have been in email correspondence over the last few days with Ben Letton, because he's now acting executive for the Lahontan Regional Water Quality Board, and he said he needed an alternate and he was considering Brian. And then when this came up, he just sent an email and said, Brian is it. So welcome to the APC, Brian Judge.
It's official. Okay, thank you. All right, so with that, I'll move us to item 5D. Item 5D is the discussion and possible recommendation for approval on the certification of the final environmental impact statement for the Meeks Bay Restoration Project. Information can be found on page 229 of your packet. And Rebecca, please proceed.
Good afternoon. I guess it's not morning anymore. Thanks for your patience. You can go to the next slide, Tracy. So today we'll be asking you to recommend approval of the final environmental impact statement for the Meeks Bay Restoration Project. And this is a really important milestone for this project. We've been working together, TRPA, with the Forest Service and with the Lahontan Regional Water Quality Control Board on a joint environmental document. And today will be, the motion will be a TRPA action recommending that portion of the document or the TRPA analysis to move forward to the governing board. And with me today, I have Teresa Cody with the Forest Service. And she's a hydrologist and she's been a joint lead on this project. We also have Brian Judge with the Water Board, who's here to answer any questions regarding the CEQA analysis as well. And then we have as our main presenter, Adam Lewandowski with Ascent Environmental. So I think hopefully he's on the line. Is he on?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Okay. And before I get started, I wanted to thank also our stakeholder group that has been joining us throughout this process. We've had representatives from many different homeowners associations around Meeks Bay, the Tahoe Lakefront Owners Association, the Meeks Bay Vista Property Owners Association, the League to Save Lake Tahoe, the Washoe Tribe Cultural Department, Washoe Tribe Office of Environmental Protection, the Meeks Bay Yacht Club, Meeks Bay Fire District, the Marina Association of Lake Tahoe, Friends of the West Shore, and members of the West Shore community. So that's been a really robust process with lots of input that helped shape our alternatives for this project. Next slide. And just to orient those of you who are not familiar with Meeks Bay, I think a lot of you did join on the field trip that we had a couple of months ago, which was really great. So Meeks Bay is located on the West Shore, north of Emerald Bay and south of Sugar Pine Point State Park. It's a really important recreation area. It's also an entry into Desolation Wilderness and part of the West Shore overall watershed of Meeks Bay along there. I think with that, we'll go to the next slide. And then zooming into the project area, the green line shows the area that we studied with the environmental document. So in the middle is Meeks Creek, and that is a lagoon that was dredged in 1960 for a marina. The docks have been removed in the last few years for the restoration project to do some aquatic invasive species work and to study this project as well and get ready for the restoration. So that's in the middle. In the north part of the image there is the Meeks Bay Resort, and you have nice beaches, you have RV camping, you have some gift shops, and as well as a restaurant there. And then to the south is the Meeks Bay Campground. And that all of that is now operated under a concessions contract or permit with the Washoe Tribe. To the left of your screen is Meeks Meadow. And so that is a very important project that's going on right now with the Washoe Tribe to restore that meadow and to improve the hydrology there. Next slide. And so this project really is related to many other programs around Lake Tahoe and the West Shore. Restoring this watershed ties into the Lake Tahoe West Landscape Restoration Strategy. The transportation improvements that are associated with this project, including replacing that bridge on 89, was identified in the 89 Corridor Management Plan, as well as connecting the trail at Meeks Bay to other portions of the trail on the West Shore. And then any of the improvements and shoreline structures would need to be consistent with the Lake Tahoe shoreline plan. Next slide. So those of you that went to the summit today, you heard Chairman Cyril Smokey talk about the Meeks Meadow Restoration Project. And that's what these images show here. So some of the work, removing the conifers in the meadow just upstream of the creek, of the project area that we're working on. There's ongoing work right now to remove those conifers, to raise the water table, and to promote native plant species and to introduce some cultural birding practices later on in the future. And with that, I think I will turn it to Teresa to talk about the more specific purpose and need of this project.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Teresa Cody. Yeah, the Forest Service is moving forward with this project to restore both the Meeks Creek and Historic Lagoon, where the marina currently and previously existed. Also to improve the recreation site conditions and access functionality of the recreation sites on both sides of Meeks Creek in Meeks Bay. The Meeks Creek property was purchased by the Forest Service in the 1960s. At that point, the marina was already in place. The marina, more so in more recent years, required pretty regularly dredging in order to gain access, particularly during low lake level conditions. So for that reason, and to facilitate AIS removal efforts, aquatic invasive species have been an issue in this marina like many others in Lake Tahoe. The marina has not been operational since 2015. And the AIS treatments have occurred at this point, bottom barrier installation. Next slide, please. Yeah, so some highlights of the project. The Highway 89 bridge on Meeks Creek is a fish passage barrier. It is about a 4 to 5 foot drop at the downstream end of the existing culverts, which has caused, degradation of the channel downstream and obviously aquatic habitat issues with it being a barrier. Caltrans has been a great partner on the project and are moving forward with the bridge replacement concurrent with our restoration efforts. The project will restore degraded habitats and also restore a barrier beach system at Meeks Creek with the lagoon rather than the marina, getting rid of the sheet piling at the mouth. We have a Tahoe yellowcrest population occurrence on the sandy beach of Meeks Creek that will benefit from those actions. And we hope that, the efforts made to reduce and eradicate aquatic invasive species will only be benefited by the restoration of the lagoon. This Meeks Creek watershed was identified as a priority watershed for the Lahontan cutthroat trout reintroduction by the Tahoe Basin Recovery Implementation Team. So we've been working with them a lot, not only on the fish passage barrier, but just general aquatic habitat improvements possible with the project. Next slide. Yeah, so other components of the project, Rebecca mentioned the Meeks Meadow restoration, which will be complemented and, benefit also from this phase of the restoration. This is a really popular recreation site in the Tahoe Basin. So both sides of Meeks Creek in Meeks Bay have campgrounds that could use some upgrades and circulation improvements. A few actions that Adam will go over later that involve a little bit of reconfiguration of some of the lodging at Meeks Creek, but for the most part, we'll connect the two sides through a bike and pedestrian path, which will be really nice, not having folks have to walk on the highway. Sustainable recreation in this area, and also hope to get some more interpretive and educational signage working with the Washoe tribe as they will be managing both sides of the campground moving forward. Yeah, I think that's it for that one. Go ahead to the next slide, please. Yeah, Rebecca spoke about the stakeholder group. I'll just talk a bit about the very collaborative planning process for this project. Scoping for this project happened in 2018. We've been planning this project for some time. There was a stakeholder assessment completed in order to identify forum group members that would be involved in the continued planning of the project. The stakeholder forum and stakeholder group really helped narrow down the alternatives that would be analyzed in the environmental document and helped us select the preferred alternative that Adam will speak to next. Next slide.
All right, thank you. Adam Lewandowski with Ascent Environmental. And we worked through that collaborative stakeholder and public planning process that Teresa mentioned to develop a set of alternatives that meet the purpose and need for the project to restore Meeks Creek, but also respond to the key issues that have been raised by stakeholders, the public, and other agencies. And really early in this process, it was clear that almost everyone supported the restoration of Meeks Creek, but there was a lot of concern about losing the important motorized boating and sailing access that's provided by the marina. So during the alternatives development process, we considered a number of different approaches to try to continue providing boating access at the site while also restoring the creek. And so that included looking at things like a smaller marina in its current location with a more restricted, smaller restoration project. We considered providing a new boat ramp elsewhere on the site, or even providing a new buoy field. But really, after careful consideration, it became clear that there really wasn't a feasible way to restore the creek and continue to provide that motorized boat mooring or launching at this site. And so that led us to take a look at other options for lake access, including options for a pier or a floating paddlecraft launch. Next slide. So we considered a couple of options for piers. And the rationale for including a pier was that while it doesn't provide that boat mooring or launching opportunity, it would provide a new opportunity for lake access that could partially offset the loss of the marina. And there were concerns about how a pier could change the character of recreation at the site or cause conflicts with swimmers or non-motorized boaters. And through the alternative development and the environmental review process, the lead agencies acknowledged the pier would change the site, but the impacts to the character of recreation and the conflicts between different users could be managed with the right site design, including things like establishing dedicated swim beaches and enforcing the existing no wake zone, which is shown on the image here on the screen. Next slide. So we developed two different pier alternatives that were evaluated in the environmental document, and these are shown on the simulations on the screen. This is a view from the north end of the beach looking south. There's no existing pier there today, but these simulations show what the two potential piers considered in the environmental document would look like. One of them was a 300-foot fixed pier that would allow boats that have launched elsewhere on the lake to come to the pier, temporarily dock, and allow people to get out and access Meeks Bay from the water. This pier would also accommodate one boat lift for a public safety vessel. And the other option was a 100-foot floating pier that would not accommodate motorized boats, but it would provide a new opportunity for pedestrians to get out and access the lake. A major concern with the piers was the effects on scenic quality, and the environmental analysis determined that the 300-foot boating pier would have a significant negative impact on scenic resources. And that's really just because it would involve adding a new pier in a location where there currently isn't one. And there's really no way to mitigate the effects on views from the beach looking out at the lake with a new pier. The 100-foot pedestrian pier would also detract from scenic quality, but it would have much less of an impact than the larger pier that was considered. And so that's one of the reasons that a pier was not carried forward into the preferred alternative that's recommended for adoption. And I'll describe that preferred alternative in a few more minutes. Next slide, please. So another key concern during the development of the alternatives and the environmental review was the effects on visitation and crowding. And anyone who's been out to Meeks Bay on a summer weekend knows that it can get pretty crowded. And the goal of the recreation improvements in this project is really to continue to provide sustainable recreation and offset the loss of recreation from the marina. The project's not intended to attract more visitors or substantially increase the visitor capacity at Meeks Bay. And so we addressed this in the alternatives and in the environmental review by first making sure we had good current information on visitation so we could allow for a reliable analysis of the changes in visitation under each of the alternatives. We also developed a series of alternatives that reconfigure and improve recreation amenities without really increasing visitor capacity. And we took into account the reduction in visitation that would happen with the removal of the marina, and where possible, look for opportunities to expand the amount of usable beach area that's available to the public, and also expand day use areas. Next slide. So as we moved from developing the alternatives into the environmental review, another key issue was really selecting the most appropriate baseline conditions to use for the environmental analysis. As Teresa mentioned, the marina has been temporarily closed since 2015, but there was no prior decision about the long-term fate of the marina. Some of the movable infrastructure, like the floating slips, were removed, but all of the permanent infrastructure, including the bulkheads and the boat ramp, remain in place. And this project was really intended to be the process to determine the ultimate fate of the marina. Without restoration of the creek, the marina could resume operation. And so the environmental document reflects that in the no action alternative. And this is really intended to give all of you and the other lead agencies an accurate comparison of the options. If the project doesn't happen, the marina could resume use, but if the project's approved, the marina would go away. And there's some additional detail on the baseline considerations in Appendix F of the final environmental document. Next slide. So those baseline conditions are reflected in this no action alternative that's shown on the screen. It assumes the marina would return to operation if the project's not approved. It also assumes there would be ongoing management and maintenance, but no major changes to other facilities. And just to help further orient you to the site, the two existing campgrounds are shown there as the green areas. The existing parking areas, some of them formal, some of them informal, are shown as the gray polygons. We have the internal roadways shown as those dark gray lines. And then the different cabins and lodges at the Meeks Bay Resort are those smaller squares on the north end of the site. And the beaches, the tan along the water, obviously, and the day use areas are those orange areas. Next slide. So based on the consideration of those key issues and working closely with the stakeholders, we developed a set of 4 action alternatives that were evaluated in the environmental document. We first developed alternatives 1 through 3, and then we saw feedback on those 3 alternatives from agencies, stakeholders, and the public at a series of public workshops and public meetings prior to beginning the environmental review. The lead agency staff then developed the preferred alternative that includes the most desirable elements that were included in each of those alternatives. And this table shows a summary of some of the major differences among the alternatives. There's more detail in Chapter 2 of the environmental document. But really, all of the action alternatives include removal of the marina and restoration of the creek, including replacement of the State Route 89 highway bridge. And the major differences between the alternatives are really in the type and design of recreation facilities. 2 of the alternatives included those 2 pier options that I described earlier. Alternative 3 and the preferred alternative included a small, movable, floating, and universally accessible launch platform for paddlecraft. Alternative 1 and the preferred alternative include relocating 2 of the lodges in the Meeks Bay Resort away from the lake shore and replacing them with newer cabins set back further from the lake. Alternative 3 considered expanding the existing campgrounds. In each of the alternatives considered different internal bike and pedestrian circulation with different numbers of trail bridges across Meeks Creek. Next slide. So this diagram shows the preferred alternative that's recommended for approval. It includes removal of the marina, replacement of the State Route 89 bridge, and full restoration of Meeks Creek and the lagoon. It does not include a pier, but it includes that small floating paddlecraft launch that I mentioned. And it would relocate 2 of the older lodges on the north end of the site that are situated right along the shoreline, and it would replace them with a series of smaller cabins that are set back further from the lake. And this would help to improve scenic quality. It would allow for replacing some failing shoreline protection in that area with more natural shoreline protection. And would open up some additional beach space for public recreation. The preferred alternative would reconfigure the existing campgrounds to improve privacy, improve circulation, and it could allow for providing some yurts or other similar alternative camping options while maintaining about the same number of campsites. It would also reconfigure and formalize the existing parking areas to reduce coverage, improve stormwater management, and it could allow for up to 14 additional parking spaces. It includes a Class 1 shared use bike path through the site and a single trail bridge crossing Meeks Creek. But it would also allow bike crossing along the State Route 89 bridge along the highway. So bicyclists would have two options to get across Meeks Creek. This would also reconfigure and slightly expand those day use areas, and it would include some additional educational and interpretive amenities, and also a number of other resource management actions, including ongoing AIS control and protection of Tahoe yellowcress. Next slide. So all of the alternatives were evaluated at an equal level of detail in the draft EIS, EIR. And this was released for public review period in the summer of 2022. And the lead agencies hosted 3 different public forums to collect comments on the environmental document. Next slide, please. So the environmental analysis determined that all of the action alternatives would have some beneficial effects. And in particular, the preferred alternative would result in benefits to the topics listed on the screen here. And that's really due to the intent of this project as a restoration project, restoring Meeks Creek and the lagoon. But also there are benefits associated with the improved recreational amenities and lake access amenities, as well as benefits from the reduction in motorized boat traffic in Meeks Bay. And because most of those key issues were addressed through that collaborative alternatives development process, the environmental review only identified 2 significant and unavoidable impacts of the preferred alternative. And I'll summarize each of those. If we go to the next slide. So the first significant and unavoidable impact is related to motorized watercraft access. The existing marina provides capacity for 119 slips that would be removed with the restoration. And just to put this into context, that reflects about 6% of the total existing marina moorings that are available to the public on Lake Tahoe. And it also reflects about 11% of the existing marina moorings available to the public on the West Shore. And the environmental document determined that this would potentially result in a significant impact. And it prescribed a mitigation measure that would ensure that those removed moorings are returned to the pool of potential moorings available to marinas. So because those removed moorings would be returned to that pool of available moorings, over the long term, these slips would likely be replaced at other marinas around the lake. And this would maintain consistency with the total number of available moorings in the shoreline plan. And there would not be a reduction in the overall mooring capacity available to the public. However, these slips that are removed from Meeks Bay could be replaced elsewhere on Lake Tahoe away from the West Shore. And so the environmental document determined that this could result in a localized, significant and unavoidable impact due to the loss of publicly accessible moorings in the vicinity of Meeks Bay. Next slide. So the second significant and unavoidable impact of the preferred alternative is related to the temporary construction noise associated with the replacement of the State Route 89 bridge. And that's really because overnight construction might be required with the bridge replacement in order to minimize the amount of time that traffic is disrupted during the bridge replacement. There is mitigation in the environmental document that would minimize construction noise outside of normal working hours, but there could still be a need for some overnight construction that could result in a significant temporary impact on nearby residents. Next slide. So after public review of the draft environmental documents, the lead agencies considered and responded to all the comments and released a final EIS, and EIR in April of this year. The final document that's recommended for certification includes all of the analysis from the draft document, along with some targeted revisions and clarifications to address issues that were brought up in comments. Appendix F of this final document includes all of the responses to comments on the draft environmental document. And I did want to note that this final EIS was certified by the Forest Service just 2 days ago, and the preferred alternative was approved by the Forest Service. And then I will turn it back to Rebecca.
Okay, next slide, please. Thank you, Adam. So next steps for the Meeks Bay project, as Adam mentioned, the record of decision was signed by the Forest Service. If you recommend that we move forward with this, we will take this to the governing board, the TRPA decision to certify this environmental document. The Hot and Water Board would sign a resolution. And then ongoing right now is Caltrans is working and moving forward on the bridge design and the environmental document. So we do have folks here today. We have Sarah Jane Gersman available to answer any questions, as well as Laurel Rudolph from Caltrans on that public process and the design of the bridge. So that's next. That's the next big step, and it's happening concurrent to the work we're doing today. And the Forest Service is also working on design for the restoration project and for those elements that might be changed for the recreation site as well. And we anticipate that a lot of that actual work would happen probably late 26, 27. So that's a projected time frame. And with that, I'd like to pass it back for any questions.
Thank you all very much for the information and the presentation. Sounds like this is a project long in the making. Do I have any comments or questions from APC members? No? Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer Carr, for the record. First of all, I want to thank TRPA staff and everyone that was involved in the field trip. It definitely was a benefit to put our eyes on this. I'm a very spatially oriented person, and so being out there made a huge difference in the work that led up to this action today. So thank you for taking that time. On that tour, I was making some observations about the bridge, and you just mentioned that the bridge design folks are listening or in the room. Okay. Okay. But anyway, this is a comment not necessarily about the EIR. But since you opened that door for us, I would like to observe that there's a lot of aspects in my mind to the scenic quality of Lake Tahoe. And one of those scenic elements is its history. I certainly recognize from an engineering perspective that you can't pick up all that stone, that beautiful arching stone on the bridge, and like set it aside, save it for later and put it back. It's just not structurally, probably possible or practical to dismantle it and put it back together. But I would, for the scenic quality and the historic nature of that bridge that was built in 1920, I would encourage the designers of that new bridge to really consider those sorts of aspects of what that bridge might provide to that community from a historic and scenic aspect, and see what could be done with that bridge to not just plunk something that's, painted steel across that river. So that's just some future thought. So I appreciate the opportunity to provide that, because I was told at the tour that this would be an opportunity to give that feedback officially on the record. So there it is.
No, that's great. Thank you for bringing it up. I'm actually an environmental scientist. This is Laurel Rudolph. She's the TRPA liaison at Caltrans. So we're not design engineers, but we do recognize this. This is on our radar. We are having a visual impact assessment conducted, and Laurel and I will be sure to communicate what you just said to the visual impact specialist, and hopefully incorporate these things. And we know how important it is, the aesthetics in Tahoe. And so this definitely will be something we consider and that her and I will push for. So I think through coordination, through the design phase with TRPA, US Forest Service, we'll make it a point that this is something that's required.
Any other questions, comments? Go ahead, Jason.
This is a pretty significant project, as you know, you can tell from the timeline that was there. But I think we talk a lot about redevelopment from the private side, but there are a lot of public redevelopment opportunities. And I think this is one of the more significant ones. It's been talked about for a long time. So I just wanted to say thank you for everybody who's been involved and congratulations. It's been a long time coming to get here. And this will be a very significant improvement on the West Shore, especially for those who want to do non-motorized recreation on the lake. There's been a lot of discussion. Many of you have heard me bring this up as a part of this group. So I think it's a win for non-motorized recreation on the lake as well.
Go ahead, Emily.
I agree with all of those comments, and I just want to say I think it's a great project and look forward to seeing it completed.
I think it's worth a hearty hear from me. Okay, well, I also want to just mention that Sarah Jane Gersman, who just spoke with Caltrans, has been very instrumental in helping move this project forward and is really, I think she made a huge difference in getting the funding to replace that bridge, because one of the primary purposes of that funding was for wildlife and fish passage. And so it ties in really nicely with this project. The timing is really great. And I just wanted to thank you.
I truly appreciate being a part of it, and thank you so much for that recognition. I just really want to see the creek restored, the fish passage restored, and wildlife connectivity to be improved. So I've been very, very passionate about this location. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'd like to move. Do you have anything else, Rebecca?
No, we just have a motion, so.
Oh, no, I have public comment.
Oh, okay,
first.
sorry.
That's okay. APC members online, did I miss any hands raised? No. Okay. All right. Thanks, Jennifer. Go ahead, Emily.
I have a question. I'm assuming this is popular bear habitat and will be more so with the fish restoration piece of the project. As I know it's not tied to this EIS necessarily, but as part of the bridge replacement, will there be any wildlife corridor connectivity so that they don't have to cross the road?
Yeah, right now, currently proposed, we have some terrestrial connectivity that will be in the form of either an earthen bench, something under the bridge. I'm going to work with the Forest Service, with Shay at the Forest Service, to kind of determine what the dimension should be of that, but we're not specifically targeting bear. As you know, CDFW has a lot of problems with bears at the lake, so it'll probably be more targeted to small mammals rather than bear. But certainly bear, I'm sure we'll use it. But yes, that is part of the purpose and need of the Caltrans project. The Caltrans project is called the Meeks Creek Bridge Replacement, and the fish passage element and the terrestrial wildlife undercrossing is part of the purpose and need and the project description. And that environmental document, I think it's in the fall or like late winter is when it will be circulated. And obviously, you know, TRPA, Forest Service, Lahontan will be able to provide comments and review before we circulate that. So just wanted to mention that as well. But yeah. If you have any other questions regarding the wildlife undercrossing, I can answer them, but it's very conceptual at this point. So you're welcome.
All right, thanks for the additional information. All right, everybody, at this time, I will move us to public comment. Do we have any public interest comments in the room? Seeing none, do we have any online?
Madam Chair, we have one hand raised online to comment. Jim Phelan, if you unmute, you can make your comment.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I've been watching this project very closely. I was on the stakeholder group, as Rebecca and Adam will probably both remember. And I think I'd like to preface this to say that I really like this project. I like it a lot. I think the restoration project itself is just a really wonderful project. Meeks Bay is too beautiful of an area to to have things like an unrestored water body there. Anyway, I wanted to make a comment about the public access pier. I still think that a public access pier is something that's going to be needed there in the future. And especially if it could be put down by the Calet Mansion where there's already a rock jetty down there. So it keeps it away from the non-motorized uses and keeps it away from the scenic issues that you'd see if you just put it on the beach. So anyway, I just wanted to make that comment. If there's any way, I don't want to make a comment that's serious enough to prohibit the passage of the or acceptance of the environmental document. But if there's any way that there could be an addendum made to the Forest Service, if they could reconsider in the future of putting some kind of public access pier that can be used by motorized boats and or public transit. That's the end of my comment. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you for your comment. Do we have any other public comments?
Yes, Madam Chair, one more hand went up. Kirk Robinson, please unmute to make your comment.
Thank you. My name's Kirk Robinson. My sister and brother and I own the cabin that is directly south of the creek near the bridge. And we are very, very supportive of this entire project, particularly the replacement of the bridge, since it was contributed to a flooding of our cabin about 20, 30 years ago. But what I'd like to say most importantly is I thought the public process that was held was done very, very professionally. And I thank the Forest Service, TRPA, Manhattan, all those that are sponsoring this project. Listen very carefully to those who participated, all the groups, and came up with a plan I couldn't have imagined when I started participating. I think it's a wonderful way to look to the future rather than go to the past, which a lot of people seem to want to do in a Facebook page related to old time Meeks Bay. And sort of the last thing I will say on all of this is that in terms of mitigating the sound from rebuilding the bridge or replacing the bridge, being the closest, by far the closest residents to that bridge, we're all for it. We'll deal with it for a year in order to get that bridge replaced. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment.
Madam Chair, there are no other hands raised to comment.
I appreciate that. Thank you. We'll close the public comment for this item and I will take a motion.
Chair, I'll make that motion. Motion to make the findings required by the compact Article 7, Chapter 3 of the TRPA Code of Ordinances and Article 6 of the Rules of Procedure and certify the final environmental impact statement for the Meeks Bay Restoration Project. Do we have to do those as two separate?
Oops, sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Just minor clarification is a motion to recommend, just because we have to send it to governing board.
Round two. Make a motion to recommend that make the findings required by the compact Article 7, Chapter 3 of TRPA Code of Ordinances and Article 6 of the Rules of Procedure.
Jennifer Carr with a second. Tracy, may I have a roll call?
Ms. Ferris,
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Ms. Chandler,
Yes.
Ms. Setzer,
Yes.
Mr. McNamara,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Mr. Judge.
Yes.
And Ms. Starla.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you, Tracy.
Okay, round two on the second one. Motion to recommend to certify the final environmental impact statement for the Meeks Bay Restoration Project.
I'll second. Jennifer.
Jennifer Carr with a second. Tracy?
Mr. Judge,
Yes.
Mr. McNamara,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Ms. Chandler,
Yes.
Ms. Setzer,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Ms. Ferris,
Yes.
and Ms. Starla.
Yes.
The motion also passes.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you very much for the presentation and good luck with your next steps. We are now moving on to item number 6, reports.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, thank you for doing a good job filling in for our full-time chair who's on vacation. What a day. All-day summit, afternoon meeting. Thanks to all of you for spending your afternoon here. Upcoming events, Chapter 13 amendments that Alyssa talked about will be on your agenda next month. Possibly a Homewood information presentation. In October, possibly a Homewood action, depends on how that goes. In September, an information presentation on the Tahoe City Dam project. And then in November or later, possibly 39 North and possibly Douglas County South Shore Area Plan, which will be updated the area plan and the health facility. The possibilities depend on some information getting to us in time, so those could change. Including 39 North. Emily's mom on that one. That's all I have.
Thank you, John. Do we have a general counsel status update?
John, I think I'm gonna, John, do you want to turn, I'll go ahead and talk about just a quick update on the MAP lawsuit, the Mountain Area Preservation Foundation that challenged TRPA's Phase 2 housing amendments. So this group hasn't met since the last time, but the federal district court on July 22nd in Sacramento formally dismissed with prejudice that lawsuit. And again, this was the lawsuit that MAP filed back in February challenging the Phase 2 amendments. This was done pursuant to a settlement agreement that we negotiated with MAP. And under that agreement, just to summarize what that was, TRPA agreed to appoint a MAP staff representative to the Tahoe Living Working Group. And we've agreed to discuss a variety of issues that MAP identified. And we'll do so as part of the next phase of housing related amendments that the working group considers. There's no obligation for TRPA to take any certain actions out of those. It's just that we have to engage in some good faith discussions of certain topics that are listed in the settlement agreement. And then lastly, if we do proceed with future amendments going forward, that we'll do so in compliance with existing environmental review requirements. So that's the update on the Phase 2 litigation. We are happy to have put that to rest, put that behind us, and hopefully engage in productive dialogue with MAP going forward, as well as the rest of the working group.
Thank you, Graham. Is there anything more from John Marshall?
Nope, that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right, now on to reports from APC members, and I'll just start in the room. Any updates from the APC?
A few months ago, a few active citizens in North Lake Tahoe, including myself, formed a local conversation group that's we're calling Strong North Tahoe, that is connected with the national organization Strong Towns, that I find to be a really refreshing organization, helping lead kind of a bottom-up revolution in what we call urban planning. This is not a super organized formal group, but it is a movement to get more bottom-up community engagement in things that matter, trying to build some civic engagement and also just some simpler language around the things that we talk about here. I'm partly bringing it up because if anybody wants to keep tabs on what's happening in North Shore, we're trying to make sure that the public is in the loop. There's an email list, and get through to people who may not show up to a public meeting and to make a 3-minute public comment. So we're really organized to be really one of the first groups that's organized to support positive change and to support some of the progressive planning work that all the agencies, in particular in our area, Placer County and TRPA, are working on. So I'd encourage everyone to check it out, check out the website, and partly why I bring this up, one of our members is very tech savvy and developed a chatbot for the site that has learned about 6 relevant plans that affect development in North Lake Tahoe: transportation, housing, land use. So the TRPA regional plan, the Resort Triangle Transportation Plan, the Kings Beach Vision Plan, on and on. The chatbot's learned these plans and is able to answer planning questions through a Strong Towns lens, using Strong Towns principles. I think it's a good example of how technology can be used to kind of demystify these very thick, heavy, weighty documents that we all get to know, and many people don't have the time or the bandwidth. So check it out. I think it's a pretty interesting, feed it some questions, see what you get. It's a very quick and dirty version of it, but I think it's useful for those of you who work in agencies or even private sector to kind of see how we can channel some AI to helping especially just Joe public understand some of these complex planning topics and documents. May even be a good tool for staff. So check it out, strongnorthtahoe.org.
Thanks, Kevin, and thanks for the website. Any other comments in the room? No? Any updates from members online? No. All right. Hearing none, I'll close item 6, reports. And we are now on to item number 7, public interest comments. Tracy, could you remind us all of the remote meeting rules for public interest comments?
If any member of the public wishes to address the Advisory Planning Commission, please raise your hand now by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you'll be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. All public comments should be as brief and concise as possible so that all who wish to participate may do so. Testimony should not be repeated. The chair shall have the discretion to set appropriate time allotments for individual speakers, 3 minutes for individuals and group representatives, as well as for the total time allotted to oral public comment for a specific agenda item. No extra time for participants will be permitted by the ceding of time to others. In the interest of efficient meeting management, the chairperson reserves the right to limit the duration of each public comment period to a total of 1 hour. Written comments received by 4 p.m. yesterday were forwarded to the APC members before the meeting start time. Late comments may be distributed and posted after the meeting. Any unheard comments can be submitted via email to publiccomment@trpa.gov. Please include the meeting information and agenda item in the subject line of your email. Finally, please note the Advisory Planning Commission is prohibited by law from taking immediate action on or discussing issues raised by the public that are not listed on this agenda.
Thank you, Tracy.
Sorry, that's quite long.
Yes, thank you for doing that. I see no members of the public in the room to make comment. Do we have any online?
We do not, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I will close public interest comments. And we are now on to adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We're adjourned at 4:59 PM.
Good job.
Thank you.